is looking at you, kid.
I'm Charles Foster Kane! Hey, Stella!
Suck on this.
What has happened, everybody? Thanks for joining us today, where my guest of honor is Ronald Meyer, a freelance film critic, as well as the co-host of No Pundit Intended. The topic at hand is horror movies, more specifically, the best horror movies from the summer of 2024, as well as a preview of all the potentially cool horror films that are on our radar for this fall. Now, some of these movies we'll be discussing might have more in common with the thriller genre, but whether you're into elevated horror, sleazy horror, remakes, sequels, you name it, I feel confident you'll be interested in at least some of the movies that are on the agenda for today. For my part, I'm intensely fired up for some of the movies that are right around the corner over the next couple of weeks. In any event, Mr. Meyer, before we go any further, tell us a little bit about yourself and where people might be able to find some of your work in the world of film commentary.
I'm on YouTube, have a channel called No Pundit Intended, and you can find my current review, my most recent reviews at The Curb. I should have a review up soon of a movie that we're actually going to discuss over the next 90 or so minutes.
Nice. And for anybody who's unfamiliar with Ron's work, I'll include a link down in the description below where people can find his social media, his episodes, etc., and so forth. And I should also add, Ron and I are relatively new friends. We bumped into each other at a screening of I Saw the TV Glow back in early May, and we just struck up a conversation afterwards, walked a few blocks, started talking flicks, and we've caught a few movies since then. But what I like about talking about movies with you, Ron, is how, like me, you see a shitload of movies in the theater. You go to the theater, seems like sometimes once a week, if not more so, like 2 or 3 times a week. Yeah. And you've got the New York Film Festival right around the corner. And I know a lot of film fanatics where they only watch Blu-rays and that sort of thing, and more power to them. But I admire the fact that you, and you're of a different generation than I am, you still feel compelled to go to the theater. So it's a thrill to have you on the channel.
Thanks. I'm happy to be here.
Fantastic. Well, I can't resist playing one quick clip. When I first met you and you introduced yourself as Ron, and I threw this reference out at you, which you didn't get at the time, but I'm going to quiz you to see if you've seen it after the fact. But here's my favorite reference to the word Ron from movie history.
Charlie, my friend, Charlie Brigante, how you doing?
Hey, Sasso.
No, no more Sasso. Now everybody call me Ron. Ron. Ron from Reynaldo.
Okay, Ron, let's get to the point.
Okay, Ron, let's get to the point. So have you seen Carlito's Way since I recommended it to you this past spring?
I still have not seen it, even though I should have, because I committed to a streak of De Palma films. But
nice.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love De Palma, and he lives in the neighborhood. I don't know if he lives here year round, but like certain locations from Carlito's Way, like this famous ballet studio is 2 blocks south, and the home of the love interest in the movie, played by Penelope Ann Miller, is like 3 blocks west of me. It's like, for people who love Carlito's Way, if you walk around the village, like, oh my God, I'm like, it's like you. Anyway, Brian De Palma is one of those quintessential New York filmmakers, and I feel like his whole career was building. And for me, it kind of peaked at Carlito's Way. And in his own words, he said, I can't make a better movie than Carlito's Way. And I'm inclined to agree. I really love Carlito's Way. So you have a good one. I never shame people for having not seen something. I always I envy people's you've got a cool movie experience to look forward to. And when people are younger and they've got a lot of cool movie experiences to look forward to, that's a positive, not a negative. Do you concur? I'm sure you've encountered some people that occasionally shame you for being, a little more green than some of the people you might be talking to.
I mean, I guess sometimes I don't put pressure on myself to, and this is not the correct position, but I don't put pressure on myself to see certain things, because even if I haven't seen it, I'm pretty aware of, its cultural impact. I haven't seen, I don't know, Alien, for example, but it just feels like it's become such a cultural artifact that watching the actual movie doesn't quite, it doesn't tell you as much as just sort of an overview of the trajectory of sci-fi since it came out. It's
I
of course
have the
important
reverse
to see it,
problem.
but
Sometimes I'll pretend or feign knowledge of a movie for so long that I know I ought to have seen, that it becomes like a closet source of shame and embarrassment. And finally, I'm like, all right, I'm finally ripping off the Band-Aid and watching something. But every once in a while, I try to address a few of my blind spots. And no matter how many movies you see, everybody's got blind spots. Even the greatest film historians of all time have blind spots. And so I never understand when people get uppity about, you know, other film fans' blind spots. We all have them.
yeah, I'm trying to think of something that I'm actually ashamed I haven't seen.
Like for me, it's a lot of Japanese cinema from the 50s, 60s, and 70s when Japan was going through a real golden age of art house movies, genre films, etc. I've seen a lot, but there's just hundreds, if not thousands more that I need to see. And so I've started watching movies by Hideo Gosha, just saying, all right, that's a filmography that is completely intact, that's untouched by me, apart from the first movie I just saw a couple of days ago. I'm like, all right, I'm at least going to attack Hideo Gosha's career, then I can move on from there. But speaking of attacking movies, I have a Sophie's Choice or life-threatening question that I'm faced with in a week and a half, and that you're going to be at the same press screenings that I am for the New York Film Festival. Nora, which I know you and I are both looking forward to, is at 5:15 on Monday. It's 2 hours and 17 minutes. And I have a ticket to a screening of Megalopolis at 8:30 at the AMC Garden State 16, which is the only theater I could get, which is like a 30-minute drive west of here. Can I make it to both movies in the same evening? If you were in my shoes, would you attempt it? Like, would you go to Nora? I think by the time Nora gets out, it'll be 7:45, meaning I'd have like a 45-minute window to make this 30-minute trip to see Megalopolis. What's the appropriate course of action?
You're definitely more excited for Megalopolis than I am. It's also coming out at the end of this month. I wouldn't even attempt it. I would just go to Nora. And actually, I don't recall the schedule, but is there something else playing that day?
Oh, they're definitely, that day it's packed with like 9 screenings. But I'm thinking, even if it was like a nail biter situation where I arrive like 5 or 10 minutes late, I bet there'll be 20 to 30 minutes of ads. So I'm going to go for it. But Anora is one of my most anticipated movies of the fall. So I'm definitely going to Anora. I want to see that, because if I don't see Anora at that press screening, I'll have to wait like 3 or 4 weeks. If I miss Megalopolis, I'll have to wait like 3 days. But when you have a YouTube channel, you know, earlier is always better. It's better to be early than it is to be good when it comes to generating traffic. So yeah, as somebody who's been like, you know, watching Coppola movies basically since 1985 or 6, when I first saw Peggy Sue Got Married on HBO, I feel like this is the end of a 40-year journey of watching his movies.
Fair enough. If Megalopolis weren't coming out for another few months, I'd understand the urgency, but like you said, it's going to be available. And if you want to see it in IMAX, I mean, we're in the best place for it. Totally. So it'll be playing, I'm sure, at the AMC Lincoln Square.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I would make Anora my priority that day. I actually sort of have my own slight concern, and it's about
lay it on
the first day. Well, The Seed of the Sacred Fig is playing before The Brutalist now.
And The Brutalist is like 4 hours, right?
Not quite, but it's
long. Yeah, there's an intermission. I've never seen an intermission at the New York Film Festival, I think, for other than The Irishman. And maybe that didn't even have one. But with The Brutalist, there is an intermission.
Seed of the Sacred Fig is also quite long. And I know that they give you like a ticket to get back into the theater, but I'm just not comfortable taking any risks when it comes to seeing The Brutalist. And it kind of breaks my heart, but I might have to skip Seed of the Sacred Fig just so that I can line up really, really early for The Brutalist, because I'm not sure in that 45-minute window. Again, they do give you that little piece of like confetti tape.
You can go across the street to that little cafe and get a chicken salad sandwich and that sort of thing.
But yeah, I don't know. Something tells me not to risk it, because if I don't see The Brutalist next week, that'll put a real damper on the whole experience. All right, so give me the
pitch for The Brutalist, because I also have another Sophie. This is like, I guess it's a good time to be a movie fan during the fall, because so much stuff comes at us so quickly. I have an early access screening to The Substance, the same night as the press screening for The Brutalist.
I was going to go to that, but
Yeah.
absolutely not. The substance will be. I can see it the very next day.
That is also fair. Yeah.
Yeah. No, you have to go to The Brutalist. That is like.
Yeah,
that
these are the problems of being a New
event
Yorker. We have more theaters for movies than any other city, like in the Western Hemisphere. If you love going to the movies, whether you like seeing old movies, new movies, big movies, small movies, we have just this like wealth of theaters, from the Film Forum to the Anthology Film Archive to the Museum of the Moving Image, or like you said, the friggin' AMC Lincoln Square. I think it's the second or third largest IMAX screen in the country. No matter what kind of movies you're into, New York is a great place to see them.
Yeah, you got to see The Brutalist. It's going to be playing on 70 millimeter. Like,
all right, then give me the details. What is The Brutalist? Because I'm a blank slate.
Okay. You said that, you know, you've been on this long journey with a couple of films, and now he's like making this thing, which I don't know, many critics might say is proof that he's completely fallen, that he's missing a step.
That would have been Jack in 1996, but fair point.
Sure, like that this is further evidence that just like the guy who made The Conversation and Apocalypse Now and the Godfather movies is just no longer behind the camera. But like The Brutalist is, again, we haven't seen any footage, but if you just look at the images, they're very striking. And as everyone, I don't want to like parrot what everyone else is saying, but you did ask me for the log line pretty much. And it's just, okay, like 35 millimeter VistaVision projected on 70 millimeter. It's got all of that like big cinema energy, you know, like when Oppenheimer came out and there was all that promo with the giant, like 1,000-pound reels or whatever that needed to be like carefully transported to projection booths. And it's just got all of that around it. And it's supposed to be this like really expansive epic. And people have compared it to Once Upon a Time in America and Andrei Rublev.
Holy moly, those are big ones.
And the Godfather. I mean, those comparisons are made frequently, but if you just look at the images and you kind of get an idea of what he's going for, the director Brady Corbett also did The Childhood of a Leader and Vox Lux. Yeah, it just, best case scenario, this is like legitimately a masterpiece.
Does it have a release date yet? If I feel compelled to see Margaret Qualley showing off her skin and so on and so forth,
it does not yet have. It may by next week. A24 picked it up. It was predicted to win the Golden Lion at Venice, but that ended up going to The Room Next Door, which we'll also get to see at NYFF. But yeah, no, it doesn't have a release date yet, and I think it's got to be. When the alternative is a movie that you can see the following day, I feel like this is a big one. I think you got to see it. Don't miss it.
I think you're luring me over to the dark side, but I think maybe at this point all the horror fans are like, are y'all going to talk about any horror movies? So let's start slipping into the topic at hand. My big takeaway from this summer: there's a lot of cool horror, there's a lot of lame horror, but like, we saw a lot of writer-directors putting movies out there, which for me is very exciting when you have like auteur filmmakers writing and directing their stories. And as you and I have discussed in the past, I think if you're looking for originality, if you're looking for fresh new voices, if you want to get, like show busy, like original IP, the horror genre actually right now has a lot of cool stuff going on in ways that other genres I find to be lacking. And so I think if you are a fan of spooky movies, scary movies, thrillers, like chills, thrills, suspense, all that stuff, there's a buffet of options now, and not all of them are equally good. But did you have any interesting takeaways from this summer? Because I feel like there seemed to be a special emphasis on the horror genre this summer that is usually reserved for the fall.
Yeah, a summer ago, the theme seemed to be like this revival of the R-rated comedy. So we had like Joyride and No Hard Feelings, and I'm probably forgetting more examples. I definitely
that Jennifer Lawrence one where she got naked. I can't remember what it was called.
No Hard Feelings, yeah.
But that's No Hard Feelings.
Yeah.
Gotcha. Oh, I was thinking of what's that Sydney Sweeney, Glenn Powell one that came out over Christmas?
Oh, Anyone But You.
Anyone But You. So No Hard Feelings to Anyone But You. I keep blurring them in my brain, but I have not seen either. I actually went to see No Hard Feelings, and I walked out after like an hour. I was like, this is boring me to tears, but I stayed for the big scene, and then I skedaddled. But anyway, you were saying, but themes for the summer.
Yeah, it seemed to be like we were kind of like in very close succession, we were seeing the release of like a type of movie that I guess hadn't been that successful at the box office for a while, even though I don't know how true that perception is. You can't quite say the same thing about horror, because obviously now for like the better part of a decade, it has been very profitable. This isn't a revival of horror that already happened, I guess, maybe around like, I don't know, 2013, 2014. If I had to pinpoint it, maybe with like It Follows, but that's probably not very accurate.
But it seems like with the emergence of A24, that was also the emergence of this new horror trend, which I have found to be really, really promising and interesting. Like, do I like them all equally? Hell no. But A24, no matter what art house films they're pushing, they always push horror films as well. So I think we can lay a lot of the, I guess, not the blame, but let's give a lot of the, what word am I sorry? We can give a lot of the credit to A24 for helping to usher in this new era.
For sure. And Neon also, which was a big winner this summer, of course. But yeah, it's just, so again, even though you can't call this a revival of horror, it's still nice to see like a consistent output from like one corner or another of the industry. It's just kind of interesting when you have that, like when you can kind of apply a theme to like a, I don't know, a streak of releases. And I guess my other kind of takeaway that we've already discussed, just like the conditions that made it possible for us to get this summer of event horror. We had the strikes, of course, a year ago, and that delayed probably a lot of the big releases that would have been taking up the schedule. And what we always say about horror is that it's a quick turnaround time, and it's relatively cheap to make. And because of that, it's almost always very profitable, even if it doesn't draw in like, you know, huge swaths of people. It's still, because of how low the budget is, it's very easy to turn a profit. And you were saying in a separate conversation that, you know, like, again, you can be very nimble with the release dates, especially out of a festival. So I guess a kind of absence of big studio fare kind of allowed for these movies to sneak in there. And that would have, I guess, just been interesting in and of itself if we were just getting a lot more horror films, but they were, I don't know, schlock like Smile or something. But instead, we actually got a lot of like really cool, original, visionary stuff. Longlegs, Cuckoo, Blink Twice, just like very like distinct filmmaking signatures.
Totally. Yeah, I think your theory, you hit it right on the head. Like, would Neon have grossed over 100 million with Longlegs if the release schedule had been flooded with a bunch of $200 million movies? We will never know, but Neon had their most successful film they've ever had this summer due to a few vacancies in the release slate. So yeah, I'm always for great horror movies from any era, whether it's the 1930s or the 1970s or the 1950s, like I'm rocking out right now with my Jacques Tourneur Curse of the Demon. But I feel like over the last 10 years, I agree, people will look back on this last decade very fondly. I think time will be very kind to a lot of the new voices that have emerged. And just this past summer, I mean, I will be following Damian McCarthy and JT Molnar and Osgood Perkins moving forward. Are they my favorite horror directors? No, but I think they all are very talented, and I look forward to whatever they'll do next. And the year, like my favorite horror movies of the year might still be yet to come. And the latter part of this month in October, November, and December. So I just think it's a very good time to be optimistic about the horror genre. But let's start with the official like first horror movie of the summer. Memorial Day comes on May 27th. And after that, up through Labor Day is the summer of horror. So 531 in a Violent Nature, written and directed by Chris Nash. Here is a little clip. Now, you and I have talked about this movie off mic and off camera before. I was intrigued by the gimmick and the approach because I like that kind of like video game over the shoulder angle that's very familiar from like Resident Evil 4 and that sort of thing. And I grew up watching a shitload of Friday the 13th movies. I mean, every movie about teenagers screwing each other at a lake and somebody hacking them up with a chainsaw, I was willing to give it a shot. Whether it was good, bad, mediocre, didn't matter. I was just going down the rack of the video store, grabbing any horror movie that I had not yet seen. But as I've stated before on this channel, I thought this movie just curled up in a ball and died by the end, apart from a few scenes that I enjoyed. But am I being too harsh to In a Violent Way?
I think you're being too kind.
Okay, fair enough.
I didn't like In a Violent Nature at all. The concept is interesting.
I know, sorry, quick correction. I keep calling it In a Violent Way. I'm thinking of Miles Davis's album In a Silent Way, which is one of my favorite jazz fusion albums. And I've even got the clip written down as In a Violent Way. You all have to catch me from saying In a Violent Way instead of In a Violent Nature. In a Violent Nature is the name of the movie. I don't know why I keep calling it In a Violent Way, but if you've not heard In a Silent Way, check it out. Got some groovy tunes.
I hadn't noticed it, but I'll keep an ear open.
Fantastic.
Yeah, I think the concept is interesting of setting a slasher movie through the perspective of the slasher, but I didn't quite understand why that made it necessary to not have like any kind of narrative. You know what I mean? Like movies set through the perspectives of slasher films victims. They still have like time lapses and interesting stuff going on. I just didn't understand why having the slasher as a focal point meant that it needed to take place in real time and that we needed those like video game style shots. Like, why do we have to watch him walk through the woods to like no end? When we're seeing a movie set from a victim's perspective, it's not like we're seeing their each and every single movement. There's still some kind of story going on. And I just think you can do the same thing with a slasher movie without making it this like labor to sit through.
Yeah.
Unless
and
slashers by their nature just aren't interesting characters. But I think that's the job of a movie like this, to make them interesting.
Totally.
Instead, we're just following this guy through the woods, and I just thought it was so dull. Though, of course, there was that one incredible kill.
Yeah, there's that one incredible kill with the girl doing yoga, which, you know, everybody was like applauding in the theater down at the Alamo Draft House and having a fine time. But by the end of the movie with that car ride, I mean, I could feel the energy escaping the room. And the actress who's speaking, it's like, I would characterize it as almost like a nervous tick or like a limp in an athlete, where she kept doing this thing, like this kind of like, she had this like gesture she kept kind of falling back on. And maybe she's just inexperienced, but I feel like it's the job of the director to say, stop going back to the well of that one gesture you keep doing, because it's incredibly distracting. But here she was just telling the longest, most boring story possible. It's like, this is how you're going to end your movie, with your weakest scene of the entire film. And I'm sure the director is, oh no, you're not, you're failing to see all the complexities and nuances lurking beneath the surface. Sorry, when you're making slasher movies, I welcome complexity and nuance if you want to bring it in. But in the end, you also have to deliver the goods. You got to entertain. You have to give us spectacle, thrills, chills, suspense, sex, gore, all that good stuff, all the nutrition a growing boy needs. And I just feel like in the end, it kind of failed in its primary duty. But I applaud anybody, anytime somebody goes out into the woods with limited resources and a small crew and emerges after a couple weeks with raw footage for a horror movie. I applaud the effort, but that doesn't mean we have to take leave of our senses and not be critical of the final product.
For sure. I don't really have anything else to say about this one. I was so happy. I almost immediately didn't vibe with it. And from its opening moments, when I realized what this was going to be, and I guess I already sort of had an idea of it, but then really being faced with it, I was just like, oh, we're really going to just follow him through the woods. It lost me. And And yeah, I was so happy when it finally ended.
All right, fair enough. Well, let's push on to the next on the agenda. June 7th, a movie I did not see, The Watcher, from director Ishana Shyamalan, the recent NYU grad who also happens to be the daughter of M. Night Shyamalan, who also has a movie on this calendar we'll be getting to. I know The Watchers was based on a book. It kind of died at the box office. I don't know if it has any vocal defenders or not. Do you have any strong opinions about The Watchers?
Pretty crap movie, decent style. I saw it in the middle of the week at like, I don't know. It was a late showing. It was the final showing of the day at Essex Crossing. And yeah, it had like dull, but one of the most fun experiences I've had at the movies, just because no one in the room could take it seriously.
Gotcha.
And that's often a problem at horror movies. Sometimes most of the time, I think it's unjustified. In fact, when we talk about oddity, I'll mention an experience. But in this case, it just, the movie did not deserve to be seriously considered. There was one moment that actually gave me the biggest laugh I've had in a theater in quite a while.
I'm assuming it was unintentional.
Yeah, I think. Oh, I really don't know. But there was just this one character who said something in a way that, like, the grammar was really off, and I can't really get into it without describing details that just aren't going to be interesting to someone who hasn't seen it. If you have seen it, it's when someone proclaims that, like, they're going to be implementing the rules now around this like little
I'm the captain
dwelling.
Yeah.
And the way it was delivered, it was so funny, and I couldn't stop laughing for, I want to say, like nearly 3 minutes.
Well, at least you got 3 minutes of laughter and joy out of the experience, even if it wasn't necessarily Ishana's intentions with the movie. But yeah, I can remember vividly right around the time of M. Night Shyamalan's kind of downfall before his resurgence or comeback, when people would see his name attached to trailers, and especially here in New York, people would laugh at the trailer's expense, you know, having not even seen the movie yet, and just his reputation was just in tatters. And I think he has mounted a successful comeback. And M. Night apparently is just an absolute barbarian when it comes to raising money. He's like, his family they're not afraid of a little hard work, and he goes out and he, you know, pounds the pavement, talks to investors, and makes the pitch and gets money for his movies. So here we are after 25 years. I don't know if his daughter will enjoy the similar trajectory. What she will need is something like The Sixth Sense to really put her on the map. But it sounds like this movie was not The Sixth Sense in any way, shape, or form.
I think that she's got a good eye. Like, it's a technically well executed film, nice use of color. I mean, but just the script was, yeah, just really bad. I mean, Dakota Fanning. There's I'm actually struggling to remember. There's a bird that I'm trying to recall if it. I think in the beginning you sort of predict that this bird is going to factor into the plot, and forgive me if I'm forgetting a way in which, in fact, it does become pertinent. But it just seemed like an excuse for her to
have beautiful aerial photography of the bird.
No, for Dakota Fanning to just have something to speak to so she can provide exposition.
Oh, gotcha. So it's just a narrative kind of expository gimmick.
Yeah. Again, perhaps I'm being reductive and I don't recall the details of the film. It was something that it didn't stay in my head for long.
Yeah. I was out of town for my 25th college reunion that weekend. And when I saw the withering reviews and commentary, I was like, you know what? I think we can move on. And also, it's hard when you have a YouTube channel. It's much easier to watch movies or tackle things that you have to look forward to, you want to discuss, as opposed to playing catch up. And I also am a big believer in just following your bliss. Like, I remember hearing from A.O. Scott about how there was one year, and I used to really love his articles he'd write for the New York Times, but there was one year where he saw 300 new releases. They obviously were not all masterpieces, and it kind of broke him, and it kind of broke his movie love. And I really feel like, even if it means like a few movies kind of wash on by, and you might have to like circle back at like the end of the year to catch them, but like nobody should like like labor over trying to see all the movies. As long as you're seeing a lot of movies where you genuinely, sincerely have like the best of intentions and hoping to have a great experience, I feel like you can kind of do no wrong as a film fan, no matter which movies you're watching. But I do try to keep my finger on all the trends. But yeah, I did not feel compelled to circle back and give the watchers a fair shake.
Yeah, lots of movies I don't like that I still recommend my friends and family watch. This isn't one of them. I wouldn't waste my time.
Fair enough. What about A Quiet Place Day One, June 28th?
Okay, we're already on A Quiet Place.
Because I saw the first one, I felt like I'd been run over by a bus. Like the gimmick totally worked, and I have no idea why. I skipped the sequel, and it was like during COVID. I didn't even have an excuse as to why I didn't see it. I think I was already not bored by the gimmick, but I felt like I'd gotten all that I needed out of the gimmick in the first movie and didn't feel compelled to see more of them. But this new one was very successful. Like whether I want to see more Quiet Places or not, we're going to get like 10 more because this movie made piles of cash. So somebody out there really enjoyed it.
I'm not a big fan of the Quiet Place franchise, but I thought this was the best entry.
Okay.
Which
Are you biased because it takes place in New York?
No, I'm biased because I like franchise movies that have like a real streak of their filmmaker's identity running through them.
Gotcha.
And I think it's so cool that to prepare yourself for this movie, you'd be better off watching Michael Sarnowski's Pig than you would be any of the other Quiet Place films.
Gotcha.
Like, it's more of a Sarnowski film than
just auteur filmmaking under the guise or under the, like, hidden beneath the veneer of studio filmmaking.
Did you like Pig?
I'm ashamed to admit, and even it's been recommended to me like 50 times, I've not seen Pig.
I don't actually think it's even that great, but it looking back now, it's clear that like this guy has some very specific interests.
Gotcha.
And it's just interesting to see him continue to explore them in, a moderately like a mid-budget studio franchise.
Well, I always enjoy smugglers. Like if you look back at Hollywood, like in the 20s, 30s, and 40s, when it was basically like the showbiz factory, almost like an assembly line. But you did have a lot of filmmakers who like to smuggle in things. And so they might be making a Busby Berkeley style musical, but they got some other things you can kind of see that reflects the filmmaker's taste and personality. So it sounds like he's trying to do a similar thing.
Overall, though, I think the movie is, just fine. But
okay.
Lupita Nyong'o gives a very good performance, and yeah, like Pig was about like the love of food and sort of expressing love through food, and how that is tied with like memories of being with people who matter to you. That's just all at play in A Quiet Place Day One. Like it's first and foremost that than it is a Quiet Place film. In fact, you could remove a couple of details and it's just its own kind of small like indie sci-fi, and so I appreciated that, and that's why it's stuck in my memory despite my like not really being that impressed with the film overall.
And this is case in point why you're here on the channel, because there are a lot of people out there who have like strong opinions about movies, but they don't do the work and they don't see the movies. I genuinely, sincerely appreciate the fact that you get your shoes on the pavement and you hunt these goddamn movies down. But we are ready to move on to July 5th with a movie which I know that I think you enjoyed it more than I did, but it was a big, high-profile release this summer. We're talking about the third film in Ty West's X trilogy, Maxine, and I have a clip prepared right here.
The blood's wrong.
Molly Bennett, meet Maxine Minks. Pleased to meet you. Sorry.
We've all got blood on our hands now.
So Maxine, I think of the three, X is my favorite for very sleazy reasons. I just like the fact that they're making a porn film and the girls look great. Like it's my interest sometimes can be boiled down to what is going to provide me some basic, stimulation to my senses. I think I liked Maxine more though than Pearl, mostly because I thought Elizabeth Debicki was so convincing as the director of the Corvette. I kept hoping, like, why can't she be the star of the movie? She's a much more interesting character at this stage, but I found all of her storyline really interesting. But make the pitch. Maxine, I don't think it did quite as well as A24 was hoping it would, but what did you respond to in this third film?
I think no, my ranking isn't quite an inversion of yours, but I would put, I think Maxine's my favorite of the trilogy.
Gotcha.
And then I would follow it with Pearl. So for you, it's X, Maxine, and
then Pearl. And I liked Pearl, but I guess after people, X, because Pearl suggested that there's going to be some stuff about like stag films and like, like 1920s era pornography. I was like, oh, it's cool. It's going to like show like smut from a different period, but there was just a tiny little taste of it. And it's funny. It's one of those things where like sometimes what you expect or what you're anticipating, what you're hoping for might be completely at odds with what the filmmaker's intentions might be. Maybe it never even occurred to him that he was going to create this kind of smut trilogy. But if you're making a movie where erotica is at a major part of the plot in all three, I just feel like X was the only one that really delivered on that front. Like, Mia Goth swimming in the lake with the alligators and the nude and that sort of thing. I was like, all right, this is some really juicy stuff.
I think for most people, their order of preference is X, Pearl, and Maxine seems to be the least well received. I understand that the story isn't that compelling, but just didn't feel the story was that compelling in any of them. So for me, it really boils down to the film style, gotcha, which I think is the only, and that's why X is my least favorite. I think it has the least style, the least, the kind of, I think it's the most lacking in terms of a visual identity. Whereas Pearl, of course, has that like 30s Technicolor thing going on. I believe some people have compared it to Douglas Sirk. I guess that's one of my blind spots. I'm not familiar with his filmography.
I know,
but I can understand what people are.
Yeah, like Douglas Sirk in the late 50s with like All That Heaven Allows and like was it Whisper of the Wind? But like in the late 50s, if you like melodrama and if you like Technicolor, holy shit, Douglas Sirk is your guy. Like Todd Haynes loves Douglas Sirk, but you have to really be in the mood for melodrama. Not everybody likes melodrama. It's like, it's basically like soap opera terrain, but with exquisite craftsmanship. But getting back to Maxine, like I was hoping for like basically more coke, more porn, more gore, more excess. Like I feel like filmmakers like Ken Russell or filmmakers like Brian De Palma, like in the 1980s, made a lot of these really, these movies that would go to the dark side in urban settings involving hookers and streetwalkers and serial killers. Like people like Abel Ferrara would also explore that terrain. I just wanted Maxine to go a little bit deeper into the dark side of like making low budget horror films in Hollywood in the 1980s. And it just felt so like, it was so beautiful to look at. It was kind of glamorized, but I think I could have actually really been totally okay with everything about the movie, but I wasn't all that excited by the revelation in the third act. And I feel like if you're not into the revelation in the third act, which I won't reveal here, that can kind of make or break the experience. I was hoping for something that would be tied to the movie industry as opposed to her history, which might even be a spoiler in and of itself. But I think that's what really kind of soured me on it. I do like Ty West's movies, but Maxine, yeah, I guess I was just hoping for a little bit more.
Nicole Kidman apparently likes his movies too, so we might be seeing that collaboration soon.
That would totally work for me, as long as Nicole Kidman promises never to make another one of those goddamn AMC commercials ever again. Here in New York, I don't know if this happens everywhere else, but here in New York, oftentimes, not always, but oftentimes when those fucking things start playing, the audience goes, woo! They cheer. I'm like, I want to kill you all. So anyway, I don't like those. I don't like those intros, which were introduced a couple of years ago, and they just won't go away.
Yeah, I am a Regal Unlimited member, so I fortunately spared those episodes. Yeah, I hear you about the story. That's the complaint about this movie I've most frequently heard. But at the end of the day, I just don't think any of the films in this trilogy, I don't think the other two films in this trilogy have like really great stories. So I quite like Maxine, I think, because I walked in with extremely low expectations.
Got it.
the script. I just wanted to have like a good visual experience, and I did. I thought it was. I've had this issue in the past. So my local Regal has this one auditorium that it isn't great. Like, it's small and it's not stadium seating, but the screen, it just adds like this grain and like shimmer to everything. I remember watching the Banshees of Inisherin on that screen and thinking like, it was the second time I'd seen the movie, and I was just like, wow, it's so much more beautiful than I remember. But then I realized, like, no, it's just like that screen that adds
a little texture,
something so wonderful. And I saw Maxine on that screen, and I don't know what the movie will look like outside.
Interesting, because the movie does
gorgeous.
Artificially create a little bit of that aesthetic on its own. But I hear you. I've been told by people who are in film preservation that this is a ridiculous emotion to experience. But I've gone to the film form before. I was watching an old Francois Truffaut movie from the 30s called A Day in the Country. It's like a short film. It's like 40 minutes long, but the print was so beat up and so destroyed. You could see the projectionist was having to like move heaven and earth just to have the movie continue to go through the projector. And so it's like scratchy and like audio pops and everything. And I was just loving that I was like watching like a real physical, tangible thing on the screen being projected. But if you talk to somebody in film preservation, like, no, like, that's ridiculous. The film should look beautiful, just as beautiful as the day that Francois, actually, no, I'm saying Francois Truffaut. It's Jean Renoir. It's a movie that Francois Truffaut admires, but it was Jean Renoir's film, A Day in the Country. In any event, so I do enjoy a little bit of texture, but sometimes apparently film preservationists don't see eyeball to eyeball with that emotion.
And I think just on a stylistic front, yeah, it's some of the long takes, just the colors. There's this like steely kind of 80s, 90s thing. Like, there's just like the navy really comes out. I don't know, of these like studio lots, there's just the kind of the over green LA setting. It just looked so great, and I thought a lot of the compositions were impressive, and so I just really didn't hold anything against it.
What do you think of Mia? Because Mia as an actress, ever since I first saw her in Nymphomaniac, the last like 10 or 12 years, I think she's put together a pretty remarkable filmography in a very short period of time. And while of all the actresses who are currently dabbling in like, the horror genre, you could make a case for her being kind of the queen of horror right now. Between movies like Infinity Pool and Maxine, I just feel like she clearly has an appetite for these kinds of movies. What are your impressions of Mia Goth as an actress and her instincts in terms of what kind of material she's drawn to?
I thought so even though I said Maxine is my favorite film in the trilogy, I think it's got her weakest performance in the trilogy. Okay. She was pretty remarkable in X, of course, because she's playing two characters and she's buried under makeup for one role. And I think her best performance to date is in Infinity Pool. I really dug that movie. Yeah. And I thought she was, for all sorts of reasons, just like very memorable.
And that she finally got to use her real voice. Her real voice in interviews, like, you're the scariest person that's ever lived. Like that high-pitched, like weird baby talk. I don't know what that accent is, if it's an affectation, or maybe she's from a village where everybody talks that way. But when you see her unfiltered and speaking candidly, it's like more terrifying than the movies in which she appears.
Sure. Yeah. Nothing, though, is more terrifying than that scene in Infinity Pool of her on the hood of a car drinking wine and like telling Alexander Skarsgård about himself. That's just fantastic. Like a great scene.
Yeah, I thoroughly enjoyed Infinity Pool. I keep wondering, do I like Infinity Pool? This is a common complaint I have about a lot of people, including myself. Do I like it for what it represents, or do I like the movie? Because what Brandon Cronenberg was going for with that movie, the type of story he was telling, the ingredients he chose to include, he's like serving up on a silver platter all the things that I want. But it's like, but I have to still remember to, not be a prick, but like keep a movie at arm's length and actually judge the final product. And I still can't quite make up my mind. But the reality is I've seen it twice. I really like it, which is enough. And I would recommend that people see Infinity Pool and form their own opinion. But when it comes to genre film, anytime they go to the dark side in terms of graphic violence or graphic sexuality, I always have to like kind of check myself and make sure, don't just applaud it for the category in which the film is being released. Like, you have to still judge it by its own merits or lack thereof. But yeah, Infinity Pool, it's stuck around in my brain. So I look forward to whatever Brandon Cronenberg will do next.
Yeah, I think it's better than Possessor for sure. I
Totally.
like Infinity Pool.
Shows clear evolution. Yeah. It went from antiviral to Possessor to Infinity Pool. I think he keeps getting better, which is a very encouraging sign. Well, cool. Well, let's move on to the weekend of 7/12, a movie which I know you're very fond of. Here's a clip of The Great Longlegs.
Do you still say your prayers? Never once. They scared me.
So, directed by and written by Osgood Perkins, son of Anthony Perkins, friggin' Norman Bates himself, the star of Psycho. So we are dealing with a family that quite literally is part of horror royalty at this point. And I'd seen some of Osgood Perkins' earlier work. What it was like, was it Gretel and Hansel made beforehand, or what? Yeah, so I saw that in the theater when it came in a couple of years ago, and I'd kind of put it out of my brain until I was doing my review for Longlegs, and I looked him up while I was recording. I was like, oh, I have seen his movies, but obviously he's also worked as an actor. But I know Longlegs is in the mix for one of your 3 favorites we'll be discussing. So lay it on me. What did you respond to with Longlegs?
Yeah, I've had kind of an interesting journey with this movie. So I'll just start by saying, sorry, I'm blanking for a moment. It's like when you try to recall stuff that you've kind of drafted, it's just, and it's not organically.
So you got to prepare nothing, just fly blind at all times. Yeah. And just bullshit people.
It's just, I have like several things I want to say about Longlegs, so I'm trying to like prioritize them.
I'll start with what blew me away, and it's totally independent from the film. But the fact that Neon bought this film for $10 million, then they spent $10 million more marketing it. I've never seen a better social media campaign for a movie ever than the one I saw for Longlegs. You want to talk about getting champagne for the price of beer? Everybody involved with their social media awareness strategy for this movie, slam dunk, home run. Like, I don't know how much money Neon lost on their Michael Mann Ferrari movie, but it's like Neon, I think, has finally figured out their strategy. This is the kind of movie Neon might be making, and it's the first real evidence that I've seen that Neon's going to be a serious competitor to A24 moving forward.
Yeah, I can actually, unfortunately, answer how much they lost on purchasing Ferrari, because I recently discovered that I made a very embarrassing mistake in my review of Ferrari, and on my letterbox I had to like put a little asterisk. It's a really dumb mistake. I thought the movie was purchased for $90 million, which is of course ridiculous because that would make it one of the most expensive acquisitions of all time. But I guess I just like misread that somewhere, and I thought, oh yeah, they paid $90 million for this like piece of crap.
Could have been worse. Anyway. Apple paid $200 million for Argyle.
Yeah, I guess the difference in this case being like it was financed for $90 million, I guess, by Mann, and then they bought it. I suppose it's a little different than when the studio is like financing a project from the ground up. But yeah, so that's the only reason I now know that. I read an interview with the CEO of Neon. I believe his name is Tom Quinn.
And he's a very sharp guy. I can't remember his name, but I've heard him in a few interviews on the podcast The Town. He's a lifer. You can tell he's going to be producing movies for decades to come. I'm long on my prospects and predictions for Neon.
So yeah, as far as just like the marketing campaign is concerned, a couple things I guess I want to say about that. One, just sort of like a takeaway that I want to present sort of as a joke, but I'm also being serious. I guess it succeeded for the same reason The Whale did. You take like one of the most like recognizable faces in the world, and you promise people that they're going to look dramatically different than they normally do, and you just hide them from the public. And that, I mean, obviously The Whale succeeded for different reasons, but there was a similar like air of anticipation around seeing, because they withheld the trailer for so
it was a
long.
pure exploitation movie. I know it's based on a play and it has like, you know, it's dripping with drama. People wanted to see the suit. They wanted to see the fat suit.
Exactly.
And that's all they care about. So yeah.
And with Longlegs, we just wanted to see, like, holy crap, what have they done to Nicolas Cage's face?
Totally.
You take one of the most recognizable guys, he's the biggest name in the movie, all
By
due
far,
respect
yeah.
to Micah Monroe and Blair Underwood. And you just, like you hide him in all of the marketing, and that created so much anticipation. And it's kind of unfortunate, you know, I'm sure someone has already made this observation online. So sorry if it sounds like I'm beating a dead horse, but it's just kind of sad that future generations will never be able to experience Longlegs the way we did, because we went into it with contextual awareness of this marketing campaign. And before his face, before we had never gotten like a good look at his appearance before it was revealed in the film, like you know, I don't remember how long it takes, but like well into the movie. So the marketing,
like that first scene is like just the mouth down in terms of the framing.
Yeah. With that like great opening where we just see a shocking glimpse, but we don't actually get a good look at him for a while. So the marketing campaign kind of worked with the structure of the movie in a way. And it was just this really long buildup that began from like the first marketing of examples of the film's marketing to the moment in an hour screening of the movie, like, I don't know, however many minutes in, I'd say 50.
And
or
some
so.
of the tweets, it almost made us like in the position of one of the people like investigating the Zodiac killer, where they kept posting on these arcane esoteric symbols and be like, well, what does this mean? Does it mean anything? And it almost turned us all into like amateur sleuths trying to figure out what the movie was going to be about.
And just like no one is ever really going to be able to experience the movie that way again, because images of his face will now probably be like all over social media. And so if someone is watching this movie in 10 years, they'll just never really be able to replicate that experience.
But, you know, Psycho, while on the subject of Perkins, like Psycho, when it came out, they had all these great posters of Alfred Hitchcock pointing to a watch on his wrist saying, nobody will be admitted after the movie has started. And people are like, what the fuck? Because back then, when you went to the movies, start times didn't matter. You would just go to the movies. And if you happen to walk in the middle, you'd watch that feature, maybe the double feature, a few newsreels or shorts. And then you would just watch until the feature where you came in got to the point back to where you first entered. And then you would leave. So people just went to the movies to see, like, it was like turning on the TV. So no one will ever know what it was like to be like, wait a second, you're not allowed to just show up whenever you want. You have to be there on time. That was incredible marketing at that time. But Psycho has managed to stick around.
But I would say, like, a lot of its effect, I didn't know that fact.
It's a great poster. Hitchcock was a master, I guess, almost like a carnival barker. He knew how to, you know, fan the flames of anticipation and that sort of thing.
And I would say that Psycho's effect today is very watered down, especially because so many of the films that came out after it embrace those tropes. So by the time you see Psycho, you're probably already really familiar with all of the stuff, like the
violins, like the Bernard Herrmann score is incredible. But like the idea of like shrieking violins while somebody's getting stabbed, groundbreaking, you know, 60 something years ago, but obviously it's now been endlessly imitated.
And I think just for that reason alone, even though there are a couple reasons, I think Longlegs it was a very unique film going experience this year. And it, in the absence of something like Nope or Oppenheimer, it felt like the event movie of the summer. And I think it was for me. And yeah, it's definitely the movie I was most
Inside Out 2.
Maybe like among the best movies of the summer. I think Inside Out 2 is quite good, but I have a lot of problems with Longlegs, but just the experience of seeing it and anticipating it really kind of became, like just something that I think will be hard to replicate for people watching it in the future. And definitely,
especially in the absence of crowds, my crowd, you could tell they were primed and ready. And it was what I like is that if you go to the Film Society, I keep saying Film Society Lincoln Center, AMC Lincoln Square, if you're not in the IMAX screen, if you're just like in the regular multiplex part, they still have a lot of those theaters that were constructed in the 90s where it's all like ground level seats, but old school seats that don't even recline. We have to sit up like upright. And I actually prefer those because it helps me pay attention and focus. But I was in this like, tight screening room with all these horror degenerates that were just like so fired up and excited for the movie. And you will never be able to replicate that. Even if it's a revival, when you have a revival, typically it's filled with people who are already familiar with the movie. So it was definitely one of my most memorable crowd experiences I had this summer. And everybody thankfully was on their best behavior. No phones, nobody kicking my seat, nobody farting like next to me. Like, the more people that are in the theater, I'm such a cynic, the more variables there are where things can go wrong. I'm like, it only takes one asshole to ruin a movie for everybody in there. And if you have a packed auditorium, the likelihood of somebody ruining an experience skyrockets. But luckily, long legs, I managed to get through it intact.
For sure, yeah. Love going to the theater, but not because it's a communal experience. That's actually the bug, not the feature.
Yeah, well said.
Yeah, so long legs. I had kind of a weird journey with this movie because, again, I was really excited for it. In kind of like a base exploitative way. I just wanted it. I didn't care that it was sort of like a sleazy interest. It just not sleazy is not the right word, but it did just boil down to like, what the fuck did they do to Nicolas Cage's face?
What do you think of his performance?
Oh, like what you would expect. Sure, it's memorable. I don't know. His performance it's really just like the design of the character. I think that's going to kind of stay most iconic. And but sure, yeah. I mean, I don't. When I think about what I appreciate about that movie, it's really just Osgood Perkins style. And I saw on a screenshot, not a screenshot, but like one of those compilations of like every frame in a movie. And it just really drove home like what a distinct visual identity it has. It felt very, very tactile. It was just something I wanted to hold. It's the movie that gets me the most excited about filmmaking. Unlike a movie we're going to talk about later, we've seen this streak of auteurist horror thrillers coming out for a while. And this one really it continues that trend, but it's also its own thing. Like it really, really has its own distinct voice. And
yeah.
I
think
Oscar
Perkins, he'll book 3 movies off of this. Like it did so well and made so much money. He'll be, as long as he wants to stay in this genre, Neon and A24 will line up gigs as long as he cares to keep making them. So I'm looking forward to it. I also look forward to seeing what Alicia Witt will do with this little bump to her career, because I've been watching her in movies since she played Alia in Dune in 1984 as a little girl. Not until you tell them what I really am. I mean, she was fantastic as a little 8-year-old girl, but here we are, 40 fucking years later, and she's still giving us memorable performances. So, and I noticed like after this movie came out, she got very active on social media, I think just because she wanted to kind of fan the flames, because everybody really responded to her performance. I thought she was kind of like the secret weapon in a lot of ways for the movie. Yeah,
I agree. Some of my favorite, just that clip you played at the beginning of the segment, that quite, or do you still say your prayers? It's I don't know. I don't know what that movie did to me. Like when I first saw it, I kind of hated it. I thought it was dumb because I thought it was going to be mostly a procedural with like hints of the supernatural, kind of like.
She does like David Fincher's Zodiac, basically.
More like True Detective season 1.
Gotcha.
I think Zodiac was like clearly based on a true. I knew this was obviously going to be a genre film, but I thought, or maybe that's not.
Like the FBI tracking down the killer, looking for clues.
Yeah, I thought there was going to be some like metaphorical horror, some sort, like again, like in True Detective, where it's just sort of there to give us atmosphere. And I just wasn't prepared for the movie to actually commit to the supernatural bit. I kept waiting for a logical, grounded explanation for everything that had transpired. And I just walked in with the wrong expectations, really didn't like it.
But it's interesting how you came around on it, because if I come around on a movie, it's a slow, painful process where I stubbornly resist it. I'm like, my first instinct and first impression is always right, which obviously is not the case. But we all like to believe our first impressions are always right. But it's interesting how like very quickly you reevaluated it?
I like, it's not going to end up one of my favorite movies of the year, but since we've narrowed it down to horror thrillers, yeah, it's definitely the most memorable, most original, the boldest thing that I've seen from this crop. And it does announce Perkins. It doesn't announce him, but like The Black Coat's Daughter is very good, but this movie really announces him and shows what he's capable of, sort of when he can level up with I don't know, relatively good budget and some stars.
Yeah, he'll get a bigger budget next time, and the ambition or the expectations for performance will go even higher. I don't know if he'll be able to allow lightning to strike twice in the same place, but at a minimum for the next year or two, it's going to be a very good time to be in Osgood Perkins' skin. I'm sure he's wakes up every day like, woo, it's fucking cool to be Osgood Perkins right now, and I'm sure he's very excited with what the future might hold.
Yeah, just I think I reevaluated it mostly because its images have just really kind of stuck in my head.
Yeah.
That clip you played is just so exciting, watching that like purplish blood boil. And I love that the opening, of course, that everyone's talked about. I just love there's this shot that looks like something from Tim Burton's darker, more demented days of, I think it's actually the first time we just get like a really, really long look at him. There's this like field behind him with these like bare trees. And yeah, it's a movie that I just haven't been able to visually shake. It's so stylistically distinct.
And I'm also just very happy for Micah Monroe, because after It Follows came out, everybody's like, ooh, next big actress is here. And then she appeared in The Guest, which I also really liked. And then she appeared in the Independence Day sequel, which I hated, but then she continued to work, but it's like either through bad luck or poor script choices, she hasn't had her movie really break through and show her off in a way. It's like in almost a decade. It's just a nice reminder. She hasn't gone anywhere. She was still working, but I feel like her career is back on track.
Sure.
All right. Well, any final words on Longlegs before we move on to my favorite horror movie of the summer?
Just that, like, of all the movies we're talking about, it's the one I'm likeliest to consider purchasing. Again,
okay.
There's just, you just want to like hold it. It just feels like a really distinct piece of filmmaking.
Like, murder, mayhem, disturbing. I just want to hold you and pinch.
No, it's the cut to, that red title card. It's just like, oh,
great. Yeah.
Wow, like.
Yeah, it's a visual medium.
Get too excited about film. Yeah. In fact, that's my problem. Maybe sort of my problem with the next movie we talk about, which I think has a better story than Longlegs, but again, it is a visual medium and it just doesn't quite deliver on that front. Sorry to like.
Oh, no worries.
Get ahead of you.
How dare you have a different opinion than I do?
No, not that. It's just you didn't introduce the movie yet, and I'm already giving my verdict.
That's totally fine. We have no strict structure here. So the next movie on deck is...
You're in trouble. What? Would you just open the door? I am telling you that there is someone in there with you.
Oddity from director Damien McCarthy, a filmmaker with whom I was totally unfamiliar until July of this year. Saw this, got properly freaked out, and then based on the recommendations from the comments, I watched his earlier film Caveat, which came out 4 years ago. And that one also freaked me out to the point where, as a 48-year-old man, there were a few nights where I went to sleep with the lights on because I kept thinking the dead body from Caveat was going to poke its head around a corner and look at me and scare me. But what I liked about Oddity was that it just through almost sometimes from the absence of horror was able to make me scared, where it can just cut away to an empty room and you're like, what fresh horrors are awaiting us inside there? And there were a few moments, I hate to call them jump scares, but there were like the moment where, and I don't want to reveal too much, but there's a moment where a girl's hiding in a tent and then something happens where I was just like, I was curling up in my seat, properly freaked out. At the very end, there's an inmate in an insane asylum who's kind of turned loose, who does some horrible things. That also freaked me out. But I love it. It was a good old fashioned murder mystery with some horror ingredients and I know a lot of people have criticized it for being like kind of a familiar trope. The blind sleuth, hot on the trail of a murderer trying to figure out what happened to her twin sister. But I liked how her powers were mild. Like, I mean, she could kind of read things, but it wasn't like she was Professor Xavier of the X-Men, able to read people's minds and that sort of thing. And yeah, there's a strange kind of ineffable thing. Like if a movie's going for subtle horror effects, as opposed to just gore and spectacle, will it cast its spell over you or not? And I went into it in the foulest mood imaginable, because right as the movie's starting and the credits starting to roll, somebody's phone was going off. And I just kind of announced to the theater, like, somebody's, please turn your phone off. And the person said, like, you need to lighten up or something like that. And as soon as somebody tells me to lighten up when I'm already pissed, I go into the darkest place imaginable and start imagining, like, just like medieval torture, all that stuff. But then somehow the movie was able to get its hooks into me, and I was able to get on its wavelength. And yeah, I just fell under its spell. But have you seen Caveat, Damian McCarthy's first movie?
I have not.
It's cool. It takes, if you can believe it. I mean, Oddity is a slow burn. Caveat's even more of a slow burn, but the last half leans all the way into the horror genre. But of all the people dabbling in this space right now, working within the confines of the horror genre, Damian McCarthy has me the most excited for what the future might hold. But who knows? Maybe he'll make an Irish musical. People throwing their legs up into the air next. He's an Irish filmmaker. It's a small country, but like you mentioned Banshees of Inisherin earlier, it's just cool seeing the Irish film culture is alive and well.
I also had a really bad in-theater experience at Oddity. There was just someone who, like, and unlike The Watchers, I think it is very easy to invest in Oddity's story. I think it's, as I described it to my friend after we'd seen it, just like good meat and potatoes horror, really like well-executed formula.
What was the person doing?
Just laughing ridiculously at everything. And I guess my excuse for people,
so just like
that
fighting the emotional investment and just mocking it every step of the way.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, just refusing to engage with the story and take
it only takes one person to ruin the whole experience.
Yeah, I've had a couple of bad theater experiences recently. I wish there was someone like you to shout.
Well, you saw me.
Your phone off,
you saw me lose my temper at Strange Darling when an employee came in with their fucking walkie-talkie on, and I politely told him, like, "Look, you're ruining the movie. It's the very end. Can you please turn that off?" And then it went off again, and then I started losing my shit. Anyway, I've got a short fuse, bad temper. It's not a character trait I'm proud of, but sometimes it's justified. It's like, shut the fuck up. But anyway, not everybody. I think some people are just oblivious. Like if you're on the subway and their phone's playing out loud, they don't realize how annoying it is. Or when I was flying home from Charlotte yesterday or 2 days ago, somebody next to me was watching Law and Order on their phone with the volume on. I'm like, there's a special place in hell for you, and it's below child molester. If somebody can hear your phone, you deserve to be shot. That's my attitude. But anyway, I'm getting sidetracked. How do we get on the subject?
I don't disagree.
But back to Oddity. So you said you thought visually less striking, but if you just like good old fashioned like murder mysteries, the piece of the supernatural, once again, it's delivering the goods.
And I know we like to these days compare every cool thing in a movie to something that was done by a movie in the 70s, but I did think it was kind of, I sort of thought it was a 70s-ish thing that like the perspective kept roaming. Like you didn't always know who the main character was. There was a good stretch of the movie where you suddenly thought like, oh, maybe
it's the girlfriend or the husband.
So it's just interesting how the narrative focus kind of shifted and kept us on our toes. Thought it was just, like a good, felt like snuggling up with like a nice, copy of some old like horror short story where like the pages have gotten yellow, something
with a great little twist ending to kind of leave you with a gasp before you move on to the next story in the book.
Wouldn't say it's not like a predictable movie, but I mean there's a certain,
without saying when you figured it out, or I guess what you figured out, how far ahead of you were. I was like I think like a minute ahead of the movie, but I think for people who are paying attention, it might seem fairly obvious from the outset, just because there's only like 4 characters in the movie. So it's like, well, who did it? Well, there's no butler. So it's going to be one of these people. So I don't think it's that challenging to be kind of ahead of the reveal, but I was barely ahead of the reveal, but that's probably because I was so distracted by some other things. But yeah, I don't feel like I'd kind of ruined it for myself by kind of figuring it out in advance.
Yeah, it felt like a good old fashioned experience, and the cliche, and sometimes there's a fine line between, you know, cliches and homage, and I thought this landed on the right side of that line. I liked it a lot, but again, the lighting, the shot choices, some of the editing was good. There's a particular moment, I think it's the one you were referencing, involving a tent, where like this one cut is just terrifying.
Yeah, that got me.
But yeah, I just thought like there could have been a little bit. I think the production design is even good. Obviously, that mannequin is
the wooden man. Here I am.
Yeah.
A friend of mine, Bill Scurry, posted a tweet recently. It's like, this is precisely how I feel waking up every day at age 48, and just like, you know, posted a picture of the wooden man, which I thought was very apt.
But yeah, it didn't, and that's why I think Longlegs just has the edge over it, even though it has less of a satisfying story. There's just something stylistically missing about Oddity, which is unfortunate because I think I was probably more engaged with it than I was with any other horror movie I saw this year.
All right. Well, speaking of engagement, let's move on to the filmmaker we already mentioned earlier in the episode, M. Night Shyamalan's Trap, which came out on August 2nd. Maybe you have to define horror very broadly to include it, but obviously he has made a ton of horror movies over the year. This is more of like a thriller, kind of a ticking clock scenario. I don't think I'm in error saying that. I think you enjoyed it a little bit more than I did. I liked the hook. I liked the concept. I was there day one. Didn't necessarily like the follow through or the execution. And by the end, I was like, if you just want to make a concert film featuring your daughter, make a concert film featuring your daughter, and you can show off her entire catalog. And then when she kind of took over as the central character for a while, that's where I think the movie lost me. But make the pitch, M. Night Shyamalan, Trap. I think it did okay in terms of box office, but it has not been a success on the level of his earlier films from like 25 years ago.
I liked it. I think it's got more value than just being a showcase for his daughter's pop career. I think it's well made. I like the colors. I like the vibe of it. I think Josh Hartnett is really, really good.
Totally.
Yeah, it's. So I ended up somehow seeing it 3 times. I didn't want to. It's just I saw it.
I didn't want to do it. They made me.
Well, because unfortunately, the people in my life like aren't as prompt to see a movie as I am. So
Gotcha.
I had friends who wanted to see it. Then my girlfriend wanted to see it. So we just I just got roped into seeing it multiple times over the summer.
So,
and I enjoyed it. I think my 3rd watch was my favorite.
Okay, that's the question. So it grew on you. Okay.
Yeah, I guess
what gets better with subsequent viewings?
Just
because you might be the one person in the United States who saw Trap 3 times this summer.
No, well, if you look on Twitter, it's got its fans.
I think a lot of people have really responded to Josh Hartnett because they've been watching him in movies since like The Faculty by Robert Rodriguez. He made 1,000 years ago, and they've been following his career. And sometimes he'll kind of go away for a couple of years, and then he'll kind of come back. He is a charismatic dude, and he's got chops, and he's totally game. But his daughter annoyed the ever-living shit out of me, and I thought the final third just once again, I wouldn't say it rolled over and died the same way In a Violent Nature did, but it was getting close, and I felt like it was almost trying to turn his wife into the protagonist by the end. It's like, just let me see the whole movie from the point of view of this strangely charismatic serial killer who loves his daughter and his family and that sort of thing. But I thought the strongest part of the movie is the first, like the trailer covers the first third of the movie, and I think that's the best stuff the movie has to offer.
Yeah, that's actually my problem with it. Sort of that it copped out of a sort of contract I thought it had made with the audience. I wanted to see 1,001 ways to evade capture in a crowded arena. Like,
yeah,
that's what I thought we were getting, and I thought that's what would have really required some creativity on Shyamalan's part. Like, how do we keep him here, but also keep the story varied? Like, he can't just do the same thing over and over again.
How can he stay one step ahead of these forces that are always closing in? What kind of ingenuity will he fall back on? And there was some of that, but I think once they leave the stadium, it starts to lose some of its urgency.
And because now it's like there are so many more ways that he can outwit the cops that it just becomes less interesting. It becomes less challenging, right? Whereas
and it's no longer the trap. The trap is the trap. It's the venue where this concert where the trap is being staged.
I think it could have had like a scene or two after they leave the concert, but it continued well after that, and I just that's when it lost me. Obviously, I think the scene of them arriving at their I guess I should issue a slight spoiler alert. Well, we've already kind of spoiled it, but yeah, once they arrive at the home, I think like that's a proper conclusion. But then it just keeps going beyond that, and I think a lot more time should have been spent at the arena. I really wanted to see. I thought we were being teased with that shot of the stage entrance, that like underground like walkway. And I thought like, okay, good. We're setting up like this is going to come back in a really interesting way. And I was excited to see that. But then, yeah, once they leave the arena, it's just like you've widened the sandbox and now you can kind of do anything. So it's not as impressive anymore.
And it just becomes any old thriller at that point.
Exactly.
It loses what made the movie specific in the first place.
Precisely. Yeah. That was my issue with it. But I still think it's a good time. And I think, yeah, Hartnett is in this interesting part of his career now that I guess kind of began with Oppenheimer a summer ago. And I'm glad to see him doing some like off-kilter stuff.
He's ready for his dad roles. Every actor at a certain point transitions to playing the dad. He's now playing the dad.
And I've always been a fan of Shyamalan. And I think like I was a big fan of Old. I like Knock at the Cabin. I even like The Happening. Yeah, this is a good piece of filmmaking.
Yeah, I am less big on Shyamalan, but no matter how much trash I might talk about his individual movies, the joke's on me because I see almost all. The Old is the only one I haven't seen. So it's like he can take my criticisms and laugh all the way to the bank because he gets my money every time. But just in the interest of time, I'm going to push us along to Cuckoo from August 9th, written and directed by Tillman Singer. I have not seen it. It's one of those movies where I missed it the first weekend, and I haven't had an opportunity to circle back. I will be circling back for this one before I do my top 10 of the year, but I know you've seen it. Make the pitch. I've heard a lot of people praising Hunter Schafer, but also saying that the movie, it's so ambitious and it's attempting so many things. Perhaps its reach exceeded its grasp, but I have no dog in this fight. You tell me. What did you think of Cuckoo?
The trailer really got me excited for it going into the summer. It was one of my most anticipated titles. I had a feeling it wouldn't live up to my expectations, but I still got what I wanted. It was highly stylized. Again, I hate to bring things back to the 70s, but yeah, anything that like looks cool and has a lot of contrasting bright color, it feels like something, you know, like an artifact from the 70s. And yeah, I enjoyed looking at it. I enjoyed the craftsmanship. I thought the strong shadows were really effective, especially in one moment of her riding her bicycle.
In the trailer that gave me a minor heart attack, which never happens when I'm watching trailers, but she's like on a bike and there's a spooky thing over her shoulder.
Right,
and I remember, like 2 or 3 times I saw the trailer, I was like, oh, did that scene live up to what the trailer teased?
Yeah, I think it's a good looking movie with like it uses its lighting well. It's not just, you know, there's so many horror movies or just movies in general that just have like point and shoot cinematography. And yeah, I think this one, it's just easy to appreciate the actual like material of the thing. Is it great?
Hunter Schafer, because obviously she's got fans from Euphoria, and I saw her in Kinds of Kindness, the Yorgos Lanthimos movie earlier this summer, where she unveiled quite a bit, but this is the first thing where she's like really like the lead, I guess, apart from is it Dan Stevens playing her father in it, or who plays her father?
Martin Sokas. I'm not pronouncing that correctly, but you know, he's one of those hey, it's that guy. Like, you've seen him in a million things.
Gotcha.
It's so hard to narrow down a title. He's just like one of those faces you've seen in a million things. Yeah, no, Hunter Schafer was great. I didn't care so much for Dan Stevens. I know, like, the internet thinks he's like this guy. I get like his appeal. I understand why it's fun to watch him ham it up, but yeah, for some reason I just didn't walk away like thinking that much about his performance. But I thought
Better than
Hunter
or worse
Schafer was
than
excellent.
Abigail, the little baby vampire movie?
His performance or the movie?
Yeah.
I thought he was actually better in Abigail, just because of that one moment where he's like, "Those are fucking onions."
Gotcha.
That sticks out. In Cuckoo, I thought he was fine. Hunter Schafer, really good. Introduces all of this unexpected emotion. Really was like invested in the movie because of her character. And yeah, just good grain, good use of color, good lighting. I'd watch it again, even though like I didn't love the story, but I guess I'm just at that point in my like film viewing life where I'm okay with style over substance.
Yeah, there's nothing wrong. I mean, for me, if a movie has enough style with enough craftsmanship, that becomes like your thematic material in and of itself. Like, style is everything. Like, when you're reading a great book, is it the plot that holds you, or is it the voice of the author? And the same thing with the film. The voice of the filmmaker is ultimately the experience. And so, yeah, I have no problem with empty style over substance movies as long as the style completely rules. But of all the movies that I missed this summer or didn't see, Cuckoo will definitely be, the moment it's available on digital, I will definitely be watching it before I do my year-end roundup. But any final words on that before we move on to the next?
Just that I think like Schaefer's appearance in the movie also, it's just very like I can see that becoming like an iconic silhouette or something. Just
okay.
Like her.
What about Halloween costumes?
Sure. Yeah, it's very. It'd be very easy. You just have to like wrap some gauze around your head and like have this like brace that looks like a robotic arm in a like a Navy bomber jacket, I guess. But it'd be easy to copy as a Halloween costume, and it's just a cool, like, I can see in the future if this movie gets reappraised once it's available at home, I can like see that becoming kind of like an iconic look or something. And again, the movie is just so like good looking that you can pull so many different shots out of it and make like a really nice, you know, like tweet or something.
All right. Like, that's how I judge a movie. Can I get a good tweet out of it? But, you know, that's fair. That is how, I mean, you're talking about virality. That's how movies catch on. And also, when a movie is finally available on digital, there are plenty of people who go to the movies once a year, if that, but they will watch a million horror movies at home. So it wouldn't surprise me at all if it enjoys a major second life once it's available on digital. But the next one on our to-do list, I don't know if I'll have a ton to say about it, but I got to at least acknowledge it because it combines horror with science fiction. But we have Alien Romulus. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Now, Alien Romulus has to date made like 320 million, making it, at least unadjusted for inflation, the second most successful Alien movie ever released behind Prometheus. I saw it. I like Fede Alvarez. I'm rooting for Fede Alvarez. I want him to do original films, though, as opposed to franchise films invented by the people, because there are parts of Alien Romulus which are, it has what can only describe as like blender storytelling, where you take a few recognizable scenes and beats from earlier entries in a franchise, throw them in the blender, and then say, hey, look, like it's an Alien movie because it's got all these moments you recognize from other films. That does nothing for me. It's something that's also happening right now in the show, The Lord of the Rings, Rings of Power. They throw scenes and lines into the blender and then just kind of pour them out and hope that they kind of make sense. Like, that's not how you tell a story. You don't just like, you just don't string together a bunch of random trivia. But there's no denying that Fede Alvarez knows how to shoot the shit out of a movie. And when it comes to that kind of electromechanical aesthetic from 1979, he really succeeded at recapturing it. But and you mentioned earlier you had not yet seen Ridley Scott's film. Did you go see Alien Romulus?
Nope.
All right.
I missed it.
Do you in general, do you find yourself drawn to science fiction?
Yeah, sure. I think, in fact, like Cuckoo has a lot of like, it leans towards science fiction. But yeah, no, sure. It's I don't know. Just like I've seen Prometheus. I heard good things about it, and then I waited for the reactions. And your criticism seems to be the one shared by, like, I guess the movie has its fans, but what I kept hearing about it was that it was just kind of like a greatest hits compilation.
Totally. That's a perfect way to describe it.
Yeah, I just thought, like, I'm fine. If it were directed by Ridley Scott, I definitely see it.
I feel like
regardless,
you can cut and paste my review for this movie for every other Alien movie or show that will ever come out. It's fine, but it's not as good as Alien or Aliens. And that is how every Alien movie or show, that's the exact same criticism I'll have moving forward. I'm thrilled to see people having a good time with the movie, watching a movie called Alien, but I would just recommend that they watch Alien from 1979, because after a lot of soul searching over many decades, I finally decided that it is my favorite science fiction movie. But moving on to a movie which a lot of people might not have heard of, but 8/16 had a movie called The Deliverance, which debuted on Netflix on 8/30. Have you had a chance to see The Deliverance?
Yeah, I've seen The Deliverance.
Worth a hunt, or leave it alone?
I mean, if you've seen the memes, you know, but yeah, Glenn Close does some really campy stuff in it. Ultimately, though, I just think it's directed by Lee Daniels. Crazy, like, he's an Oscar nominee. I just can't believe he's doing this. But yeah, there's something that Glenn Close does that I won't repeat, and that's really, really fun. But unlike another movie we're going to mention, it's trashy, but it takes itself seriously. And I think that's like the greatest sin you can commit. Like, you can be campy as long as the filmmaker is like aware of the tone they're striking. I guess maybe you can argue that this leans into that it pokes some fun at itself, but yeah, no, not really worth your time, except for Glenn.
I'll just stick with Deliverance, which came out 51 years ago, because it still packs a major punch a half century later in ways that I think a lot of younger filmgoers might be like, oh my God, are you even allowed to make movies like this? That is Deliverance. So yeah, I love Deliverance. It's funny. It reminds me of like when superhero movies start saying like the Batman or the Wolverine. I'm like, all right, how many like ways you're going to try to make the title seem fresh again? And you can almost like, oh, this is The Deliverance, but obviously there's no connection. But anyway, it just, for whatever reason, that immediately popped into my head. But next up, 8/23, a movie which I saw, and I know for a fact, because you told me you like it, it might be in your top 3 for the summer. Blink Twice, from director Zoe Kravitz, making her directorial debut. I'll say this, when I was reading some interviews with her about the movie, I like how she was willing to say, you know what? A lot of people like to talk smack about Roman Polanski, but I like his movies. I was like, you know what? That's the perfect attitude to have. You can, it's okay to have a different opinion than the rest of the herd. So I admired her willingness to acknowledge that she looks up to and respects Roman Polanski, even if I wasn't as big on the movie. But Blink Twice, make the pitch, because for me, I was hoping for more libidinous, wild partying in the first half, and I was also hoping for more gore, killing, horror, etc. in the second half. But it sounds like you had a pretty cool experience checking it out.
Actually, I'm not too big a fan of the movie. I have been thinking about it a lot lately because I'm trying to complete a review, and I'm a slow writer, unfortunately. I was really excited for Blink Twice because the trailer just had a ton of style. It seemed like it was blending all of these very like characteristic of the era B-flicks vehicle to social commentary. I'm just using some of the phrasing in my review because, you know, like, again,
it's fresh on the brain
about the movie. Yeah. So it looked like a blend of Get Out and Midsummer and Promising Young Woman, and it just had like all these cool stylistic like callbacks and references. But I also wanted the movie to do something new with that too. I wanted it to kind of evolve the formula rather than just emulate it. There is some really good stuff in the movie. I think it blends humor with the disturbing material really well. Adria Arjona and Naomi Ackie have like this fun slapstick bit.
What's the line about the bong hits that Adria Arjona says? That's the one part of the movie where I howled out loud when they're trying to, one person's trying to sneak and do some investigating, and they've got this like secret signal and something about ripping big bong hits or something like that. Anyway, that
fat
had me
blunts.
cracking up. Fat blunt. Oh yeah, fat blunts. Yeah. Anyway, the way she said
Yeah.
it, I hope people will be using that phrase from now on.
There's this one cut to Ackie and Arjona like shaking tequila mixers, and it's just like, so I think it's the editing, the cinematography, like really good use of color in the movie's best moments. Like it's clear that Kravitz is quite talented, but yeah, I just wanted to see her do something new with all of this stuff rather than just like blend, you know, those aforementioned titles. Overall, I think it's a good movie. It uses humor well. Like it's entertaining.
And what's his face? Channing Tatum. He's engaged to Zoe Kravitz, correct?
Yeah, I believe so.
So I always am a little skeptical when you have husband-wife teams working together. It can obviously work out great, like Gina Rowlands and John Cassavetes. They very successfully collaborated for decades. But also sometimes I worry that when actors are too friendly with each other, they will give each other too much rope to hang themselves with. And I felt like the first half of the movie, you could tell they're having so much fun just filming scenes, eating, drinking, smoking, swimming. It's like, but y'all still need to be willing to cut the fat from the bone and give us the tightest experience possible. And I felt like she was maybe too accommodating to her friends, because I suspect there have been movies where Zoe Kravitz is like, fuck you, you cut my whole goddamn part out. Like, what's going on here? And no actor likes to be left on the cutting room floor. But now that she's a director, she will at a certain point say, sorry, I love you, but your entire performance got cut. It didn't make it.
I kind of like that sometimes it was just a hangout film that gave it some texture. It gave some of the supporting cast like Simon Rex, Christian Slater, Haley Joel Osment, gave them some opportunities to, Gina Davis. So they got to have some fun, and, you know, it adds character to the film. I think ultimately my biggest problem is just how contrived it is. And I know we don't really like to say that these days because a movie shouldn't be judged on its plot holes, but there are these drugs in the movie that just kind of act at any given moment, however
they do whatever the movie needs them to do.
Yeah. And
the movie can't happen unless they kind of manipulate it that way.
And I've seen Reddit threads kind of, oh, but how about that one line that explains why the drug would act this way? And it's just like, I don't know. To me, it feels a little too flimsily plotted. And it's just, there's a difference between refusing to suspend all disbelief and like criticizing a story for playing fast and loose with its own mechanics. That's taken like verbatim from what I've been writing. But again,
how dare you plagiarize your own material?
Yeah. Yeah, that was a big issue for me. When it comes to the details, it just all kind of came apart.
Okay. Well, the next one is a movie which I think I was more fond of than you, but we've got Strange Darling, which I wouldn't say was a sleeper hit of the summer, but at least it got some attention, had a decent little theatrical run. If they'd had more money, I think they could have afforded more marketing. But I think Strange Darling is one of those movies that will probably enjoy a nice second life once it's available on digital. But I've got a little clip right here.
So I'm gonna have to ask you a question. Are you a serial killer?
What did you just say?
Now, this is a movie where it's the only movie where I'm going to be cautious about spoilers, because that is part of the experience. Like there's a twist. Maybe people have overemphasized the twist, but because the story's told out of order, it's kind of hard to know what's a spoiler and what's not. But I think you and I both really responded to that scene in the car where you have this couple, they've been drinking, they've been smoking, and they're planning on playing some potentially violent sexual games, and they're trying to like establish safe words and their boundaries and that sort of thing. And it all kind of comes unglued after that. But what really kind of kept me invested in this movie, I just really enjoyed Willa Fitzgerald in this role. I found her very easy on the eyes in the show Reacher, but this is much more interesting to me in terms of in terms of what the story ingredients are. But if you like just good old fashioned thrillers with twists and turns and shotguns and murder and people running around in their underwear and high speed car chases, it's just a good old trashy thriller, but shot beautifully in 35 millimeter by actor Giovanni Ribisi, who's not even in the movie. It's like, well, goddamn, dude, like you've been keeping your talent in your back pocket all these years. You might be a better cinematographer than an actor.
Yeah, Strange Darling. I don't remember if you mentioned this, but yeah, we actually saw this one together.
When I had my little meltdown at the poor employee on his walkie-talkie.
And I mean, I think, again, like, I don't hold it against people. Just don't understand theater etiquette, and it's even more infuriating when it's actually an employee of the theater. Like, you should care about upholding that. But anyway, yeah, I've heard it. I think that night I described it to you as sort of like, you know, I know a lot of people like to reference this filmmaker, but I think this can credibly be called Tarantino-esque, and I've seen other people make that comparison. Really long dialogue scenes of, you know, building tension, some detailed shots of food. There's this one breakfast scene with Barbara Hershey.
Which I missed like half of, but looked fantastic.
Yeah. And Ed Begley Jr., like, that was, you know, very funny, and it's a very good looking movie. But I think once the cat is out of the bag, it just starts going through the motions. And even before that happens, I know people have talked about this twist, but because the movie is told out of order, it's kind of clear what's happening. It's like, well, why would that be the case? Like, there's only one thing.
There's only one twist that could possibly be coming.
Yeah.
And so it's obvious, like when you eliminate all other possibilities, whatever remains must be the truth. So you kind of know, all right, there's a twist coming, but it can only be one twist.
Yeah. And like when our expectations are toyed with a couple times, at first it becomes like, you just know what the movie's doing because the movie wouldn't be structured that way otherwise. There would be no other good reason to tell it in that order. It kind of reminded me of Barbarian, especially, I guess, in like its attempt to be sort of unexpected and completely shift gears in the second half. Again, there are some shifts of focus that reminded me of like that cut to Justin Long driving on like the Pacific Coast Highway in that film. But I thought it was, unfortunately, I appreciated the chutzpah, but if you can even call it that, like, I don't know that it's quite as shocking as it wants to be, but there's some cool stuff in it, some striking imagery.
Definitely might be suffering from a small problem of being overpraised, in that it's been a while since the 90s. In the 90s, we got these kinds of movies all the time. But I think for a lot of people, they'd never really, in an era of just superheroes and franchises, perhaps it felt like a breath of fresh air to a lot of people. I think it's a really solid, enjoyable genre film, but I'm not going to fall into the trap of overpraising it and letting people be let down by the experience.
And for sure, Willa Fitzgerald she's great in it. Like, that's one thing I don't think has been overhyped about the movie. Can I actually, I want to make an observation, but it would require me to kind of spoil.
All right, if you haven't seen the flick, turn off your headphones for the next 60 seconds because Ron has the floor.
All right. That's enough time for everyone to check out if you need to. Yeah, kind of like the running theme within this horror trend this summer. Movies being set from the perspective of the slasher or the serial killer.
Yeah, Trap, In a Violent Nature, Strange Darling. Yeah.
All, I think, kind of proves my point about In a Violent Nature. Like, you can set a movie from the perspective of the villain and not have it be this very like drawn out thing done in real time.
Okay.
Yeah, this is definitely better than In a Violent Nature for sure.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, if I had to gun to my head, what are my 3 favorite horror films or thrillers from the summer? It's going to be Oddity, Long Legs, and Strange Darling. Those are the ones that I'll be most inclined to watch a second time. But I am still, I have not yet seen Cuckoo. I imagine Cuckoo will be a strong contender in the mix as well.
Yeah. If we've reached the end of the movies that we've seen, I guess
that's what I was going to ask you. Have you seen Afraid from August 30th or The Front Room from September 6th? Because if you have not, then we have reached the midway point.
I saw The Front Room. I'll just say, do you need to play a clip or?
I don't have a clip from The Front Room.
Okay, so yeah. Unlike The Deliverance, also trashy, but like in a very self-aware way. Catherine Hunter is a ton of fun. There's some really strange things going on in that film. I believe I was told, like, I need to confirm this. Hang on, before I make a fool of myself.
The fact that it bombed and bombed hard, because it opened at number 10 on 2,000 theaters. And it was considered the worst opening weekend for a 2024 horror movie so far, if it opened to more than 1,000 theaters. So A24, they took a little bit of a bath on this one, but I've not seen it, so I cannot speak to its merits.
So it's directed by the brothers of Robert Eggers.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
Well, more to come on Robert Eggers at the end of the video,
right.
But yeah. Yeah, so just real quick, why do you think it didn't enjoy bigger weekend?
Not a lot of promo, really. I mean,
but A24, they're the masters of marketing and publicity. Like, did they just not give it the oomph that they typically do?
I guess, yeah. It just seems like nothing comes to mind, but there are definitely other examples of just like A24 titles that have gone under the radar. It is a little weird, but I guess it's just like a late August, early September release. I don't know. I don't want to like try to offer any insights about this. I don't know. I will say it did not have the kind of marketing that I would expect.
I found that for me, the marketing was slightly off-putting, and I don't know if anybody else would react this way, but like the moment I get a whiff of, possibly, even if I'm wrong, but the moment I get a whiff from the trailer that there might be like a sermon or a lecture or a component to the film that's good for me, I wouldn't say it's a deal breaker, but it makes me very cautious. I'm like, whoa, what are y'all gonna? Is this gonna feel like, you know, a screed, or is it gonna feel like an entertaining story? I was worried about it being a screed in advance, just due to all the racial like, you know, ingredients inherent in the story. But I don't know if I mean, who knows? The movie might have been a delirious good time. But I was out of town this past weekend, so I didn't see anything apart from Beetlejuice last Wednesday.
I mean, it's worth a watch. It does some really, like, there's some good absurd comedy in it. Okay. And yeah, Catherine Hunter is gross and doing a lot of weird things. And like, it's pretty well made. It's also got this like antiquated quality that is easy for me to appreciate, especially in genre films. That's about all I have to say on The Front Room.
All right. Well, you've been incredibly generous with your time so far. I originally booked you for 90 minutes, but we still have our fall preview to go. Can I borrow 30 more minutes of your time as we rip through the fall slate and what is on the horizon?
Yeah, of course.
All right. Well, then real quick, we're going to do a little 2-minute pee break, and we'll be right back at you. But for now, enjoy the groovy tunes from Shadowrun. Alrighty. I guess I'm going to need to create a longer pee break interruption clip because this is, I think, the second time I've come back and the guest has been unavoidably detained, but I'll just kill a little time until Ron returns. I think I can hear him returning, though, as we speak. I hear him hearing a little audio coming through, but let me have a quick glance at the fall schedule. So what we're going to do for the rest of the video, we're just going to go through all the movies, starting with Speak No Evil, which is opening later this week, and we're going to go all the way through Christmas, and we're just going to give our predictions or hot takes on what might be cool or what at least is on our radar. So, Mr. Ron, Speak No Evil, 9/13. It's coming up this week. I watched the original on your recommendation. I really like the original, and I worry that Blumhouse with this remake is going to basically make the dumbed down, obvious version of a movie. And maybe I'm just cynical, but I can't stand English language or American remakes of European films, especially when the movie's only 2 years old and half the dialogue is already in English. It's like, do they just assume Americans have such bad taste or are so unsophisticated that we can't handle people with Dutch and or Danish accents? But what are your theories here? Will Blumhouse deliver something, or would this be another embarrassing failure, a la like The Exorcist Believer?
Well, the joke all summer has been that it's like the most marketed movie of the year or something, right? Like I saw this one tweet. Like, oh, shedding a tear for the final time, I'll see the Speak No Evil trailer in the theater. Yeah, I don't know. I think it looks pretty good. I mean, Scoot McNairy, Mackenzie Davis, James McAvoy. Like, I think that's really it's not that. It's more that I guess like the movie can be a lot more successful with recognizable stars, and the original Speak No Evil, of course, doesn't have
any stars, but good actors.
So for sure,
I was cracking up like a demonic, trickster while watching it, because for people who haven't seen it, without spoiling, I'll just say it does a wonderful thing where it shows how through being polite and like well-educated and civilized that you will perhaps accommodate negative behavior to the point where ultimately it might seal your own doom. And as you and I discussed before we started recording, perhaps Blumhouse might not be as willing to kind of like let that ride to the degree that the original did. And I have a feeling that the whole point of the original movie will be lost if suddenly everybody starts like skinning off and grabbing weapons and just turning it into a conventional action movie.
Yeah, you can really tell in the trailer that it's going to, I don't know if they'll prevail, but they're definitely going to fight back. And I think that's another thing that will be more amenable to American audiences. Yeah,
like it's like people won't be able to handle, basically the whole point of the original movie would be anathema to them, but that's why the original movie was made. Anyway, I will see it on Thursday afternoon. I will do a compare and contrast, and maybe I'll be guilty of judging the movie in advance, but I judge almost every movie in advance, whether I'm excited for it or not. It's very hard not to have strong opinions about movies if you spend a lot of time watching and talking about movies. But the movie that I am fired up about, The Substance, on September 18th, and I have a clip right here.
This is The Substance.
I'm Sue.
I mean, Margaret Qualley, ever since I first saw her in The Leftovers, I think she like Mia Goth, has been slowly but surely putting together a pretty incredible filmography in a short period of time. Big fan. And obviously I've been watching Demi Moore and stuff since I was like, a little kid in the 1980s, like St. Elmo's Fire and stuff like that. But this is written and directed by Coralie Fargeat or Fargeat. I don't know how to pronounce her last name, but this one seems to have Fargeat. Nice.
I could be very, very wrong about that.
But it seems to have a little heat, a little momentum on it. Like this one seems to be on people's radar.
Yeah. Again, it's like, this is what I wanted. Well, again, I don't know how, based on what I've heard, I can assume that this is what I wanted Blink Twice to be. Something that like has a lot of the stylistic hallmarks that we've come to expect of elevated horror, but it's also doing its own thing. And it is pushing forward, and it's not just content settling for a formula.
Yeah, it seems like it's, if anything, like overtly trying to avoid formulas, but it seems like, yeah, for whatever reason, even though like the great heyday of body horror under like kind of like the guise of David Cronenberg, its heyday was back in the 1980s, but so many people grew up watching his movies. We now have an entire generation of filmmakers who love body horror. So I'm looking forward to seeing what they do. Every time I watch the trailer, I'm like, I get a little more excited each time. Maybe I'm peaking too soon, but I don't think so. It looks very stylish. And at a minimum, Margaret Qualley is, she's attractive. I liked her quite a bit in that scene in Kinds of Kindness when like, Jesse Plemons like, don't you all want to watch, what does he say? He's like, don't you want to watch a video or one of our movies or whatever that line is? And I won't say what the movie is, but the reveal of this movie that he so innocently keeps suggesting that they watch, she's involved, and it's hysterical.
I'm a big fan of Julia Ducournau and Titan, and I think like The Substance fits into that.
That school.
I mean,
film.
Also just, you know, like
I don't pronounce it with another French accent. Titan. I've heard French Canadians at least pronouncing it Titan. I don't speak a word of French, so I don't know. For me, I'm from North Carolina and Virginia. I say Titan, but I know that's probably not accurate.
I think I was saying Titan for a while until like I heard that it's supposed to be Titan, but that's the most like accent I'll put on it. I generally find it like I really hate when people are just like, you know, speak like I speak multiple languages and there are certain words that like don't have an English counterpart. And when I say that word in English, like if I'm referring to a type of soup or something, I'm not going to suddenly roll my R. There's just no reason to unless I'm speaking that language. And I find it really annoying when people are just speaking the way we are now, and then suddenly they're just like, yeah, you know, I put some, I bought some tomatoes, some basil, some mozzarella, and it's like, I just hate.
There's a brilliant SNL sketch from the early '90s where everybody in this office overemphasizes their Spanish pronunciation, except for the one person who actually is a Spanish speaker, and he's like, you know, I know y'all take your Spanish pronunciation really seriously, and it's really annoying because people are like, oh, what do you want to do today? You want to go have a enchilada? And it's anyway, it is. Yeah, it just makes you seem like a douchebag. And so, yeah, it's I love the impulse to try to learn other languages, but yeah, you cannot lean into it. Going back to Lord of the Rings, Rings of Power, they're overdoing the rolling of the R's in that show, and it's become one of the main sources of mockery when it's like, one does not simply walk into Mordor. It's like, no, just call it Mordor. We know it's supposed to be like Mordor, but you don't have to go all in. Anyway, yeah, I think you and I see eyeball to eyeball on this.
So I guess the comparison to Ducournau is really easy, just like two female French filmmakers who are into body horror. Yeah, but I don't know. I feel like if I didn't know who the director was and I just saw the trailer, yeah, I think I'd definitely be getting some Ducournau vibes from that. And
I know nothing about her work, but the trailer delivers. It's like it does everything you want a trailer to do. It's entertaining, it's enticing, doesn't give away the game. So yeah, my anticipation continues to rise.
And it's also got an epic length, which is uncommon for. It's like 2 hours and 20 minutes. It's kind of uncommon for horror movies. So it feels like this is going to be a really like oh, I don't like we're getting some fine literature here. You know what I mean?
Okay.
Like the top shelf champagne of body horror.
I hope it delivers. What about?
And I was also going to see that early access screening, but then the press schedule came out, and I'm like, not missing the Brutalist for any.
I am leaning toward the path that you recommended, but because I am excited for The Substance, it's a Sophie's choice. But that I'd rather have too many options and too many movies that I want to see, as opposed to the reverse, like around January, February. It's like, is there anything coming out this month that I want to see? But yeah, once September through December, always a really good time to be a movie fan. But along those lines, Never Let Go, September 20th, is going to premiere at Fantastic Fest. The day before its release. Is this one on your radar?
I think I saw a trailer for it. No, it's not on my radar. I might check it out. Not sure. I don't really know.
The trailer, I'd say it got my curiosity, but it did not get my fever the way that The Substance did. And I hope it'll be good. I mean, any movie that I plan on seeing, I hope all of them will be fucking incredible. I know that's statistically unlikely, but it definitely is one that it might be cool. Seems like a cool kind of dystopian, like dystopian kind of like futuristic movie, but I really don't know a ton about it. And another one that just recently jumped onto my radar, I hadn't even heard about it until like a week ago, but Azrael on September 27th with Samara Weaving, and I've got a clip right here. Now, I know very little about it, apart from the fact that it's like a futuristic setting where like you're not supposed to make any sound or you'll be shunned or sacrificed or whatever. I like Samara Weaving. I liked her in that movie. What's the one where she's like the entire family's trying to murder her? She's running around the house. I'm totally blanking on the name of it.
It's not hide and seek, but it's like another. It's something from a game.
But I think people know what we're talking about. But basically, she's marrying into a wealthy family, but there's this ritual they do, and you basically have to survive the night. And she's like, all right, well, I'm going to kill all you motherfuckers. And she's like whipping out crossbows and swords and all that sort of thing.
Ready or not.
Ready or not. Yeah. And so I liked her in that. And I think she's got some chops. She could be another, like, you know, scream queen, to borrow a term, like Micah Monroe, like Mia Goth, like any of these other actresses who have enjoyed a lot of success in the horror genre. I feel like maybe I wouldn't say she's missing her window, but I would have expected after Ready or Not that she would have done like 4 or 5 movies at this point that have kind of popped in that similar way. I'm rooting for her. I'm rooting for Azrael. I hope that it'll deliver. But once again, the trailer just dropped a few days ago, so I really am a blank slate. But does anything about it grab you?
Not really. You know, when I mentioned that, like, it's cool that not only are we getting more horror, but we're getting like original kind of visually, stylistically bold horror. I guess I was saying, like, instead of schlock, like, basically I was thinking of stuff like this. I could be very wrong, but it just seems like, I don't know, just the kind of thing that just seems like a very like mediocre kind generic of offering. Like it doesn't look, I guess,
generic schlock as opposed to exceptional schlock. I guess how weird and off the beaten path the schlock have to get before it'll kind of catch your attention. Because I feel like I'm not immune to the allure of schlock, but for me, if you're dealing with super low budgets, then you like the burden is on you to show us something you will not see in a much more like, you know, like big budgeted film. Like that's part of the joy of making a schlocky movie for $1 or $2 million is that you have the freedom to do things that a movie that costs $200 million probably would never do. But I always find it strange if somebody makes kind of a formulaic, predictable, generic, straightforward movie at a low budget. I'm like, well, I can go see some stupid studio movie and get the same experience. You're making a movie for $1 or $2 million. Go all in and go to the dark side.
Yeah, it's kind of like something I have to credit Strange Darling for. Like it is a calling card. Like the director J.T. Molnar, I believe his name is. It shows that like this person has their own style and taste, and I just haven't gotten that vibe from this film. Yeah, it just looks like a totally middle of the road option.
Totally
could
fair.
Be very wrong though.
But a trailer dropped yesterday for a movie with Sarah Paulson coming to Hulu on October 3rd. Have you seen the trailer yet for Hold Your Breath? I don't even know if it's getting a theatrical release, but Sarah Paulson, obviously a big high-profile actor.
I saw a thumbnail and I assumed it was a drama, but I guess the title "Hold Your Breath" makes sense in a horror context as well.
Yeah, I like Sarah Paulson, very talented. I know nothing. I don't even know if I watched the entire trailer, but I was like, all right, that is jejune to our conversation, is going on the list. So for anybody else out there who knows about Hold Your Breath, let us know in the comments below. But a big one coming on October 4th, or a big X Factor, purchased for $17 million at this year's Sundance Film Festival. It's What's Inside, written and directed by Greg Jardine. Lay it on me. Anticipating, ignoring, excited, nonplussed. What do you got for me?
I think I was anticipating it until the trailer dropped today, and suddenly it just kind of looked like Talk to Me from a summer ago.
I haven't seen the trailer yet, so give me the pitch as you understand it.
Just like a oh man, put on the spot. I'm always really bad with this stuff. It seems like it's got some style. It's sort of one of, I don't know, not like Climax, but like it's going to be primarily. Okay, have you seen Talk to Me?
I have, yes.
Okay, so you know there's like that one fun, very like freewheeling scene of them playing the game.
It was the best scene in the movie. Like this feels like how kids would act if they found a fucking head that allows you to be possessed by the dead. Like, of course they can do something as stupid as playing with it. And that scene was incredible. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's set to like a cover of Edith Piaf. And it's just like, oh, suddenly like the vibe of this, it's not doing what so many horror movies do, which is just
they're treating the hand like it's a bong that they're passing on the room. It's like, no, you're being possessed by dead people. It's not like, you know, a balloon full of like, you know, some weird drug. But anyway, but yeah, that scene was hilarious. I did enjoy Talk to Me, and I like how it was, you know, basically made in total obscurity in Australia, and A24 swooped in, picked it up, and made a tidy sum off of it.
Yeah, so like that scene's energy, the editing, the music, it kind of looks like that scene is this movie expanded to feature length, and like that could be really fun. I've heard that it's a ridiculously fun movie. I actually went to this year's Sundance, and a lot of people were buzzing about it, and it did sell to Netflix for a lot of money. So
17 million. I mean, that's a fuck ton, but I hope they don't have any buyer's remorse. That's a lot. I mean, once again, that's nearly twice what they paid for Longlegs.
I've heard, I mean, that everyone who's seen it said that like once you watch it on Netflix, it's just not going to have the same effect, that it's a really great like theatrical experience. I don't know. I don't really need to go in for those. If one good communal experience was The Watchers, just because we all couldn't take it seriously and we were all laughing at it.
Maybe the Paris Theater will play it, and then I'll go check it out up there. Although I keep having bad experiences up there with middle-aged women who are slurping wine and eating popcorn with their mouth open. I'm like, do y'all come to all the movies that I come to? But like, you seem to always be here right behind me. But I love the Paris Theater, but I have had some mediocre experiences with the Midtown crowd.
I'm definitely gonna watch it once it drops on Netflix, because again, I have been hearing about it since January, and it was a title that was sort of on people's lips when I was in Park City. So looking forward to it.
All right. Well, one that's definitely on my radar from writer-director Damien Leone, where I feel like in an era where there are so few franchises that are not extensions of franchises from the past, you know, like in the 30s, we had the Wolfman and the Mummy and Frankenstein and Dracula, obviously adaptations of old legends and books, et cetera, and so forth. But they all felt like the universal monsters of the 30s, felt like, you know, unique franchises to that era. And in the 80s, we had Pinhead and Freddy and Jason and Mike Myers and all these wonderful characters. But in recent years, very few people have invented new monsters. But Damien Leone has invented this goddamn clown from the Terrifier franchise. And I have a clip from Terrifier 3, which might get me age restricted, but I'm playing it anyway.
I want to know what it's like to be in the presence of that kind of evil. What goes through your brain when he's close enough to you. You feel his breath.
Sorry, I briefly clicked on Azrael before clicking over to Terrifier 3, so I kind of spoiled the reveal. But there was a part of me that, and I grew up watching these kinds of movies. If you have beautiful young people fucking and somebody with a chainsaw or an axe chopping them up, that's enough. And it looks like Terrifier 3 might deliver on that front. But have you seen any of the Terrifier films? Because the original is a short, and then it was Terrifier 1 and 2. And Terrifier 2 was made for $250,000, ended up grossing about $15 million in the theater. So if you're rooting for the little engine that could, once again, Damien Leone, I like how he is, with his own money and his own franchise and his own creation, building this world involving Art the Clown.
Don't know anything about this franchise. I think it's only really been brought to my attention over the past month by people like you who seem to really be excited for it. I'll check it out. I'm open-minded.
What the main selling point is that most of the horror effects are done in a strange way where Art the Clown, he's basically like a mime, where it's not like he's concealed by shadow or off the screen. He's just walking around and interacting with people, and somehow he still is able to be unnerving. But the main selling point is that the gore is like completely biblical. Like it's like they saw Bone Tomahawk, like, oh, that's nothing. No, I can do that with like my eyes closed. And so they just really go for it with the most ridiculous, just vicious gore you can possibly imagine. So for the gore fiends, the Terrifier franchise is right up their alley. This is the on the opposite end of the spectrum from elevated horror. It's like, no, we're going into the gutter and we're going to give you all the disgusting shit that the depraved horror fans really want to see. So take your children, take your nieces and nephews, take your mother, take your grandmother. I'm sure they will all have a fine time. But after Terrifier 3, I've not seen the original, but we have Smile 2 coming October 18th. Is this movie on your radar?
Yeah, I saw the first Smile. Didn't think much of it, but I am intrigued by this idea of like a pop star being haunted. That seems like it's a pretty strange direction to take things. So I think for that reason alone, I'm definitely gonna check it out.
I will see the original before it comes out. Actually, when the trailer comes on, I don't like, oh my God, I've already seen this trailer a million times. I actually sit back and I watch the trailer with an open mind each time. The first Smile, it must be said, was a surprise success, like almost obnoxiously so. Like it made far more money than anybody was anticipating. And everybody kept wondering until Longlegs this year, like when would be the first breakout surprise horror hit? The way like Five Nights at Freddy's last year, nobody had that movie on the radar, and it ended up like making like $120 million like in the first weekend. People are like, what? This has like a closet fan base that's just like been like screaming in anticipation. You never know. I don't know if Smile 2 will be able to replicate the success of the first, but I will be. I think there will be people like me where we heard about the phenomenon the first time around, missed it, and will be curious for the sequel. Do you concur?
Yeah, no, I think because because it's taking things in such a new direction, it's not just rehashing the same kind of very basic premise of the first one. Yeah, I think it has its built-in fans, but I think even people who didn't see the first Smile will probably be drawn to it just because the hook is good, right? It's like with Trap, right? It's a cat and mouse game set at a cat and mouse chase set at a pop concert. Like that's just intriguing, and I think this also has just like that same kind of pull.
Yeah, like what if Taylor Swift were being hunted down by these creepy people? I don't even know how the power works. Is it a little bit like It Follows, where once the smiling people start coming after you, they will continue to follow you until you become one of the smiling people? Or what's kind of the mechanic of the smile effect from the first movie?
If I recall correctly, it's just like you get smiled at or something, and then you witness that person commit suicide or do something like really grisly to themselves. And then you sort of pass on the virus.
Okay. Yeah. Like I said, I will see Smile, and I will definitely see Smile 2. But one that I'm actually excited to see, you know, better known for movies like Four Weddings and a Funeral or Notting Hill or Sense and Sensibility. Like in the 90s, Hugh Grant was every girl's fantasy of the refined, you know, effete British man living in Notting Hill, having wine and, you know, cups of tea and that sort of thing. But I have to say the third act for Hugh Grant is fascinating. And here's a taste of a little movie called Heretic.
We just need to go home.
I won't keep you if you wish to leave. But I want you to choose which door to go through based on your faith.
What does this have to do with us leaving?
Everything.
So that's coming November 15th. And I love seeing Hugh Grant going to the dark side. He keeps playing like vicious gangsters and like Guy Ritchie movies. And it just seems like in his third act of his career, he's like, I don't give a flying fuck about nothing. I'll play any part that I want. And it seems like he spends half his days drunk and just saying whatever the hell he likes. It looks like he's really going to the dark side in this movie. And I am very intrigued. The trailer immediately got me.
Yeah, same. I also like what he's been doing lately. And I guess the movie has kind of like an Ari Aster vibe, but without all of the pretentiousness. But it's got that same like pop-up book quality, or like, you know, those miniatures from Hereditary. It seems like this is sort of playing with some of those same visuals. I'm looking forward to it quite a bit.
Yeah. And also around that time, like right before Thanksgiving, I feel like we usually get inundated by nothing but like children's animation and family-friendly movies. Like obviously we'll have Gladiator 2 around that time as well, but a little counter programming goes a long way, because from Thanksgiving through New Year's, that is my least favorite time of the year. I go into a state, like while everybody else is giving out presents and going to parties, I'm like, I hate humanity. All of you can fuck off. Like I get nothing but like seasonal stress around that time. So having some vicious horror movies to sink my teeth into will help me survive that time of year, which leads me to the last movie on our list and one of my most anticipated movies of the year. I'm like rooting to all that is unholy above and below that this movie will deliver. Robert Eggers' Nosferatu. So Christmas Day, Christmas present for all the horror fans. What is your prediction of what is your opinion of Robert Eggers in general on the 3 films he's made so far? And what are your predictions for Nosferatu?
Well, this is where like my primary obsession, I guess, kind of overlaps with today's topic. Yeah, I think this movie could contend for some Oscars. I at one point predicted that Robert Eggers could even crack the best director top 5. I'm not as convinced anymore. I guess I just heard certain things about the production of the movie that made me think like, oh, it's going to have this distinct look. It's going to be technically innovative. And watching the trailer, I'm not quite sure. It doesn't look as visually distinct as I was anticipating, but I still think it could definitely make a play for some techs. I think its cinematography, I don't know, may get nominated. Yeah, I'm definitely excited for it. I don't love The Witch or The Lighthouse or The Northman, but I definitely recognize Eggers' talent. You know, he is one of the like
rank them. His 3 films so far, from favorite to least favorite, or least favorite to favorite.
The Witch is my least favorite, and then I mean, The Lighthouse is more like audacious, and I think it really like distills what his interests are. But I think The Northman is probably, I mean, it's a better time. But I think like if I want to, you know, sit down and really appreciate a piece of filmmaking, I'd probably go with The Lighthouse before putting on The Northman. So yeah, The Lighthouse, The Northman, The Witch. But if I'm just talking about like pure entertainment, then The Northman over The Lighthouse.
Okay. And what are your feelings about F.W. Murnau's Nosferatu versus Werner Herzog's Nosferatu? I did a little video recently, like a little flashback review, looking back on both of them. I think it's interesting that like every half century, someone feels compelled to make a Nosferatu movie, especially since the original one was made in a vague way to avoid being sued for copyright infringement by Bram Stoker's widow, which was ultimately unsuccessful. She sued them anyway, and the prints were destroyed. Some people refused to obey the order to destroy the prints, which is why the movie has survived. But I think it's interesting that 102 years later, we're getting a remake. Like most people that are remaking movies are remaking movies from the 70s and 80s and that sort of thing. This is a remake of a movie from 1922, which is a first as far as I'm aware.
I think that's actually like one good reason the movie might get over the Academy's perceived genre bias. Like, it's not just a horror movie, right? It's a remake of this like film that's considered a part of like cinematic history. It really plays a big part in like the foundations of filmmaking. So I think it's going to be viewed as like a love letter to the past, especially because he's supposed to be doing a lot of like, again, not that I really saw it from the trailer, I didn't see it as much as I would have liked to, but it seems like he's doing some cool like German expressionism, and I totally believe it given like some of Eggers' work that we've seen. So yeah, I think again, because it's remaking something that's so like foundational to film, that it's
I
not
often
going to
say
be
that if
met
people have
with
seen one silent
derision.
movie, they've probably seen Nosferatu. Like it's that there are not a lot of people sit around gorging on 1920s cinema unless they are like, you know, in the long tail, like the nichest of the niche of film history obsessives. But if somebody has gone through college and taken a few film classes and they've seen one movie from the 1920s, I bet it was Nosferatu. I saw Nosferatu before I ever got into old movies. So it definitely has some crossover recognition. I'm hoping for and expecting big things. Maybe it'll be a victim of its own expectations. But if it delivers, oh my God, it could dominate the holiday season because it's such the on the like the opposite end of what you expect from Christmas, like all these stupid holiday movies and like somebody finding out that they're Santa Claus and they need to go and deliver presents or some dumb fucking shit like that. Nosferatu is exactly what I want. Like when I'm plotting the deaths of all like everybody that I can see at the airport, like, you know, fighting problems going home and that sort of thing, Nosferatu might be the perfect tonic for my holiday blues.
Yeah, it was supposed to actually come out the same day as Jordan Peele's fourth feature, but then that got delayed. That would have been like an amazing double feature, especially because, like, you know, when we talk about like the people at the fore of this new trend of like elevated horror. No, sorry, not that elevated horror is a new trend, but I mean like its modern iteration, right? Like the contemporary wave of elevated horror. We talk about Jordan Peele and Ari Aster and Robert Eggers. So
totally.
Well, I don't like love any of his movies. He's definitely someone I'm always going to keep an eye out for. And yeah, I mean, I'm definitely looking forward to this. And I know a lot of people think that if you're always thinking of awards, then you're like less of a film fan. And like, I really don't care. It's just the way, like the way
I don't have any rules about filmdom or filmmania or cinemania. If somebody likes movies for whatever reason, however they choose to go about it, that's their own goddamn business. Like there's no one tried and true path to being a cinephile. And if people just want to like place bets on Oscars, that's cool. If people just want to go see the dumbest fucking remakes and reboots, fine. But like the movie
some
business,
people want to do both.
Yeah.
And
like
the
movie business needs
the
people to go to the movies. So first and foremost, you have to just love movies. Like that's the most important thing. Like you just got to love movies a lot and watch a lot of movies and so on and so forth. So yeah, I don't get nearly that preoccupied about, oh, you're the wrong kind of cinephile.
And it's also not that like you're into the Oscars because, as some people might say on Twitter, like because you like gambling. It's like, no, because you like that
you
there's
like the red carpet dresses.
No, not that either. Just if I like that there is a competition which is meant to honor like the finest achievements in film in any given year. And that's sort of, it's not that I only care about the Oscars insofar as correctly predicting them. Like I care about what gets nominated. I get really passionate about seeing, you know, stuff that I like getting nominated. And not everything I love. I mean, my favorite movie of the year so far, Sasquatch Sunset. I mean, I guess it could get nominated for best makeup, but that's obviously not
unlikely. Yeah.
I mean, it's definitely worthy.
Yeah, worthy, but unlikely. I think for me, the following of the Oscars has always been an exercise in frustration where I dip in and out depending upon the year. Last year, I dipped all the way in because I'd seen a lot of the movies that are nominated. But going back to the 90s, you know, back when Forrest Gump slaughtered Pulp Fiction, I was like, well, that doesn't make sense. Or when Titanic slaughtered LA Confidential, I was like, well, that didn't make sense. So I'm always mad. And once again, it would be, I'm the world's biggest cynic when it comes to the Oscars, overlooking movies like Sasquatch Sunset and then overpraising thunderously mediocre movies. But that's part of the discussion, like looking at the history of the Oscars, like when do they actually get this right? And it's rarely, but it's once again, it goes back to Wings. And like in 1927, it's a part of film going culture. People can ignore it or watch it or whatever. But yeah, I'm not going to ever criticize somebody for getting preoccupied because it's like, yeah, it's like watching the Super Bowl when you're into football. Is it the best game of the year? No, but it's still the fucking Super Bowl.
Yeah. That's a nice way of putting it. I also would say like makeup and hairstyling, they're not very, like it's probably the least, maybe that and like visual effects, like some of the least genre biased categories. So like, don't count Sasquatch Sunset out yet.
You know, I love the movie. I'll be rooting for it.
Yeah, we actually had our first conversation in front of like a giant,
big cardboard cutout
at the Angelica. Yeah,
they needed to have a little like tape recorder just playing the sounds of them, like, you know, grunting and like rutting in the woods and that sort of thing, just to really set the tone.
But so just to come back to my point about my anticipation for Nosferatu, yeah, I'm really, really curious to see if this can actually have some sort of breakthrough at the Oscars.
Yeah, especially like you said, if it can break through the anti-horror bias of the Oscars. Like there are a few that sneak through once in a blue moon. Like if you define Silence of the Lambs as a horror movie, it cleaned up. Like that's like probably the best example of a horror movie really getting some serious Oscar attention. And it changed Anthony Hopkins' life. It changed Jodie Foster's life, changed Jonathan Demme's life. So it can happen. So you never know. Will Nosferatu be the next Silence of the Lambs for the Oscars? We shall wait and see.
I just like Silence of the Lambs, even if you don't want to think of it as a horror, it's definitely a thriller. And that's also a genre that doesn't, or I don't like to call it a genre, but that's also a type of storytelling that isn't often recognized at the Academy Awards. Or, well, I actually disagree with it. See, I think like movies like that get in a lot more than people give the Academy credit for, but still, like just going with the perception, you know, thrillers themselves have trouble getting noticed. But in recent years, I mean, Mad Max Fury Road, Get Out, Promising Young Woman, Joker. I mean, like these, not that Joker's a horror or anything, but I just mean
but an unconventional choice for the Oscars. Yeah.
Parasite, I mean, that has some of the trappings of horror. So yeah, I don't think, like, I'm not as convinced as other people that the Academy has a genre bias. I mean, well, yes, of course, like certain
also people speak about the Academy like it's 6 people smoking cigars around a table. It's like we're talking about thousands of people voting independently. And obviously there can be narratives that some will subscribe to, but I think people get way too conspiratorial, like, oh, the Academy wants this to happen, or this is what the Academy is pushing for this year. Is like, who says? Like, there might be a civil war within the Academy. I feel like everybody likes to believe that like they will like tap somebody, oh, it's so and so's turn. It's like, well, maybe, but it also might be a nice happy surprise if somebody else wins, etc. So yeah, I try never to assign motive or design to what is probably a pretty chaotic process overall.
We've seen enough times of the industry aligning behind like one contender or another in many different categories. So, I mean, you know, like when, I mean, sometimes that upsets, right? Like it seemed like the industry was pretty lined up behind Glenn Close winning, and then it went to Olivia Colman. So yeah, there are definitely moments that shock you and buck predictions, but you know,
or Faye Dunaway getting hammered and just like, you know, reading the wrong card as Warren Beatty is, you know, looking for answers and wondering what's going to happen. Like surprises do go down. And so it led to that classic picture of like Michelle Williams and The Rock. I love that close up of all these, like, you know, all the beautiful people lined up in a row, shocked and amazed, just like the whole ceremony coming unraveled and unglued in like the last 5 minutes.
Well, that's a different kind of surprise. And we had one of those, of course, recently. There's that very infamous moment, but just like winners, I think there are enough examples of everyone sort of just falling into line and giving. I mean, like just a year ago, it was very, very clear that there was nothing that was going to stop Christopher Nolan from winning an Oscar.
It was like, it's his year, get out of the way. Yeah.
Even though there were definitely a lot of, I'm sure, more like sophisticated cinephiles in the Academy who thought that Jonathan Glazer should have won for The Zone of Interest. And I just think like that's why the nomination process is exciting. It gives you some sort of picture of like what the industry values, and you know, it's you have your own kind of preferences. So I don't know, the whole conversation about the Oscars just being for like people who like to place bets, I don't really see it that way, but it's totally I'm somehow not
it's also a
bothered
generational thing for people my age or older. For a lot of them, it's just something you did every year. Because I can remember in the 90s when like 60 million people would watch the Oscars. It was like, I mean, to put it in perspective, today it's a big number if the Super Bowl gets 120 million people. Nowadays, like maybe it'll be a good year if like 16 million people watch the Oscars, but it was a major cultural event. It was like must-see TV, one of like the 5 biggest events of the year where everybody gather on their sets and just figure out where are we in terms of what Hollywood values. So I definitely, I have a love-hate relationship because I love it for what it represents and I hate it for all the, you know, shitty choices that I don't agree with, but that's part of the fun. It's like, it gives you a chance to whip out your knives and talk some shit and gossip and debate and just dissect. And so, yeah, I'll be doing a video about the nominations and I'll be doing a video about the inevitable winners.
I definitely don't need the nominations to align with my preferences in order to still enjoy the horse race and the speculation and yeah, to talk about like, well, what did deserve to get nominated or win instead. Yeah, I'm really curious to see how Nosferatu fares this season. I made a prediction a year ago that Eggers might get in. Don't think that's going to happen anymore, but I still think cinematography is in play.
Gotcha. Well, just as a way of wrapping up, remind these fine folks who are still with us, where can they find you online if they want to talk? Where can they find you online if they want to read some of your reviews? Where can they find you online if they want to hear you having discussions about Sundance and things like that? Now's the time to plug and promote your oeuvre.
My channel is No Pundit Intended, parentheses around DIT.
It's a great name for a channel, without a doubt.
And you can find my writing kind of, you know, in different pockets of the internet, but currently I'm writing reviews for The Curb, and you might be able to catch some of my New York Film Festival coverage there. You can also find me on Letterboxd, RP Meyer, and yeah, on Twitter, the handle is NPI Film Chats.
Well, I think this conversation went very well. Before we started recording, we were debating, like, you know, whether or not we could find enough to discuss for 90 minutes. Here we are. It's been 2.5 hours, and I think you more or less you survived your first wrong reel experience, and I hope you'll come back to shoot the shit about movies again at some point at a later date.
Definitely. Thanks a lot for having me. Enjoyed the conversation.
Fantastic. Well, we hope you all have enjoyed this episode. Remember to like, subscribe, hit the notification bell. You know the drill. Check out the video description below for all of Ron's vital stats. But we hope we alerted you to some movies you might have missed or some movies that you could look forward to seeing. And if you see one of these and you enjoy it, please let us know. There's nothing more gratifying than when someone says, hey, man, caught this flick on your recommendation. Thought it was pretty cool. It makes my day. And on that note, we're going to wrap this sucker up. Coming up, I'm going to be reviewing, what the hell is that movie with James McAvoy? I'll be reviewing Speak No Evil on Thursday, as well as Lord of the Rings, The Rings of Power. And I'll definitely be reviewing some flicks from the New York Film Festival in the not so distant future. But that's all I've got to say for now. But more importantly, as always, onwards and upwards.
It ain't like it used to be, but it'll do.
You know how to whistle, don't you, Steve? You just put your lips together and blow.